Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for coming. My name's Julie LeClaire. I'm the Community Program Coordinator here at Jett. We also have Alexa, who's our director, who couldn't make it just yet because of the hurricane. So she'll be here around 3 or 4 o'clock. And then we have Eric, who's our Executive Director, that's over here. But yeah, so thank you all so much for coming. So we're just going to start off with a little bit of introductions. But before, I'm just going to go over some rules, or not rules, but housekeeping. So we have the bathroom around the corner. So if you go out here, take a right, go around the bar. That's where the accessible bathrooms are. We're eating lunch around 1:30, and then breakfast will be out for a little bit longer. So if you didn't get it yet, get it momentarily. But yes, we're going to go over some introductions. We're going to start with where you're born, where you're from, and if there was a state in the United States you can have a second house at, where it would be. So I'm going to start right here, if you don't mind. And also state your name as well. I'm sorry.
My name's Alana, and I'm from Portland. And
What are the odds? I live in Portland. And if I had to pick a spot, I grew up going to Caregiver my entire life. We still, as a family, generationally.
Oof. I was born in Taunton. I live in Taunton, Massachusetts. If I had another house, I would move to Savannah, Georgia. Love it there. But yeah, thank you, everyone. So we're just going to start with our presentation. So when Eric can come up, that would be great. Yeah, this button, actually.
Which one?
Here, he gave us a clicker.
Oh, jeez.
Unless you just prefer touching that one. Okay.
So just a little bit of layouts, but welcome everybody. On behalf of our foundation, I am delighted to be here today to bring the community together. And I think there's nothing more real than everybody listening to an opinion of where they want to have a second house and changing their minds within 5 seconds of hearing somebody else that had a better. I didn't think of that. But with our community that we're serving in Duchenne, I think everybody here is super important. Our families, to be able to provide education, support, help when needed to the advocacy organizations. We are represented by 2 today. We have some representation by PPMD, Parent Project, which is wonderful. What we do, is try to bring as much resources and much support to families as possible nationally. And then to our partners, our industry partners, I mean, look how far we've come. And I'll talk a little bit about the evolution of Jett Foundation, which is now 2 decades in. 2 decades ago, there wasn't any clinical trials, there wasn't any drug development, and it's amazing how far we've come. And all of us collectively together, it's the village. We need the village to come together. So welcome everybody. A little bit of the lay of the day. We just went through our little welcome and greeting. I'm going to give a little bit about Jett Foundation. If you're familiar, I apologize, but sometimes you can pull out something that you didn't quite know that we did. And for families that are just coming into our organization or this web of support, it's going to give you an understanding of what we do day in and day out and how we operate to try to support families. Then we got some great speakers today. I can't say enough about all the clinicians and all the medical support that we get across the U.S. We got some great speakers today, so we'll go through those, and then a little bit later we'll have some lunch, and we have some other supporting networks in this area that we'll highlight as well. So amongst that, meet and greet, we have all of our partners here. If you have questions about what's going on with the different therapies out there, they're right here, and they'll be able to provide support for you, provide some answers for you, and if not, they will find those answers and then circle back to you. So that's what we're going to be doing here. So as Julie said, the restrooms are down. Feel free to get up, get a drink. We're super relaxed organization. We like that family feel, and so if you have questions, raise your hand, and if we can't get to it, we'll find a way to get you answers. So, Jett Foundation. So that is Christine McSherry, mom of Jett. So that's Jett McSherry. So Jett Foundation, namesake is Jett McSherry, and he's right there in the photo. We were founded in 2001 when Jett got diagnosed, around 5 years old. In the early days, there wasn't much out there, and Christine made it her life endeavor to make Jett's name synonymous with a cure for Duchenne. So she worked really hard with a lot of, there's some other forces of nature in Duchenne that are heading up some of the other foundations. They got together and they worked real hard to collaborate and figure out how we can get some therapies out there for our young families. So we have transformed, as most businesses do over the years. In the early days, we were all about treatments, all about trying to find that treatment. And over that time, we've evolved. We went through a strategic plan, and it's interesting from my position if you have not been involved with a nonprofit, usually best practice is you have a strategic plan, and that's to just make sure that what we think we are doing well and how we're supporting the community is actually being received that way. So we took all of our stakeholders, some key individuals across the community, across some of our closest friends, and asked, here's what we think we're doing well. What do you think? So my goal by bringing the strategic plan to the organization was really to align direction and provide focus from top to bottom. So all the way from our board to my staff, and then out to the community. And there's no better way to test that than to ask the community, hey, how do you think, and what do you think is going on? One of the huge things that came out of that process was keep doing what you're doing, but do it really well. So what you see here are the pillars in which we operate and we deliver services to our community. So we do a lot of awareness engagement. So we just got done with a big event in Quincy on September 7th, World Duchenne Awareness Day. We had several hundred people coming together to spread the word and make sure that we get awareness out to as many people as possible, like many organizations do on that day. It's a World Global Awareness Day. We have independence empowerment, so we want to give our families, especially our guys, a chance to be independent, stay connected with community, and I'll talk a little bit more specific about that. We're here today, community education. We do 4 of these workshops a year all across the U.S. And what we try to do is select areas that have a lot of population of folks that can get to the workshop that have this diagnosis, and we also look for the underserved communities. We know that if we had 3 family members here, it would be just as important as a full room. Why? Because in all honesty, healthcare is not created equal everywhere. So there's areas that Duchenne is just not known. There's not a plethora of certified Duchenne organizations that are able to provide the information. So we want to bring that to them. We want to bring all of you together, our industry partners, our clinicians, and be able to provide an opportunity for those underserved areas. Family guidance and support, we realize that beyond this, sometimes parents just need to talk to other parents that are going through this journey. So we want to provide those types of programs for our families as well. That's our mission. Our mission statement changed after that strategic plan. So we're here today for the families. That's our primary mission. We realize that there's a lot of our other organizations that are doing amazing work with advocacy, policies, that carrying the torch on the hill. PPMD is a great example of that. There's a lot of money that's being put into drug development, but there's not a lot of money helping families today figure out how to navigate, how to put food on the table, how to stay connected with the community, and how to afford the different types of equipment that are necessary to make sure that you're able to continue to support your family in the right way. So that's our primary focus. Under independence and empowerment, how many people in the room, you can just kind of nod your head, could show me if you're familiar with our Camp Promise program? A couple hands, so gross majority. Those that did not are looking at me like I don't know what you're talking about. We offer camp experiences. So we offer this year, we have 7 camps across the U.S. We started with a camp in Washington State. Then we went into East, which is our East Coast camp, can vary anywhere from Connecticut, Pennsylvania, New York. It's been in New Hampshire. And I'm missing one, Colorado. So we have 3 originals. And then we added, after our strategic plan, one of the things that bubbled up was there's got to be more focus on our guys that are living beyond 18. After high school, what is there to do? How do you stay connected? I want a job, I want a family, I want to drive. So that was a real big focus on us. So our camps, if you can envision, the 3 main ones are for our youngest age has been 6, but we do not have an upper age limit for camp, which is pretty amazing. And why? Because primarily the only support you're going to get from a camping perspective for our guys with Duchenne or other neuromusculars is a cap of 17 years old. After 17, they graduate out of the program. We don't have that. I actually volunteer at the Colorado. I don't go as the boss. I go as a camp counselor. It's 1-to-1 ratio. We provide 24-hour care for our guys to make sure that it's a safe environment. And I gotta say, I went 2 years ago. We had a little bit COVID issue, and we didn't run camp on the ground. And it's probably the most impactful experience I've had in my entire life. It's changed the way I look at things. It's changed the way that we approach things. In fact, you can't work for Jett Foundation unless you go to camp. So it's one-on-one care, and it's exactly what you'd expect when you go to camp. It's supposed to be fun, having a great time, getting to know each other, and what we're trying to do is keep our guys connected, our campers connected throughout the year. So making sure that there's an opportunity for our guys to just be around each other, that can experience things that they only though they can understand really intimately. So we also, because of that 18-plus program, we added a camp in Arizona. It's 18 only, 18 and up. And we added another camp in Ohio, 18-plus, because there's the focus. And the programming revolves around what 18-plus would want to kind of talk about. It talks about jobs, it talks about relationships, it talks about all sorts of different things, amongst all the fun that we have there. And then this year we added a camp in South Carolina, and we'll be in Southern California. And those are smaller camps, just getting our toes wet in the community. And so far, the camp in South Carolina, I think, had 35 campers first year. And we're probably in the 15 or so out in California. So again, just trying to keep our community together. That's what the retreats are. And then Camp Promise Connect is bi-monthly. We have just activities. We do trivia nights, Jeopardy, in different ways for our community to come together and just have fun with each other and connect with other individuals across the U.S. So there's good options there. Some photos. The hot air balloon was at East. The big mountain, that's Colorado. Arizona, I think, top left. No, maybe not. But another cornerstone program that we have is our Jett Giving Fund. We recognize, back when Christine, in the early days, she went on the GoFundMe pages, and there was hundreds and hundreds of GoFundMe pages for families across the U.S., just trying to figure out how to navigate financial burdens and how to get equipment, how to find a car, and things of that sort. So that was what really was the impetus of creating the Jett Giving Fund. We have 3 arms of support for families. Our Accessible Vehicle Fund, we are getting ready to launch our 2025 application process. And basically what that is families can apply to be selected into this program. And if they do get selected, it's a partnership that's formed where the family will raise 50% or more towards the cost of the vehicle. And when that threshold is hit, Jett Foundation comes in and matches the gift. As you can imagine, the vehicles are $65,000 to $105,000, depending on the needs of the family. And we really try to take into consideration, there may be one individual that has Duchenne, but there may be 4 other children that want to travel together. And the goal here is to, again, work together to make sure that that family can stay connected to their community, because at a certain point, it becomes very difficult to get around. So those of you that are looking for that or know families that are in need of a vehicle, now's the time to have them start looking and asking, inquiring how that all works. We have a webinar that describes the program coming up in a couple weeks that also is an opportunity to just learn more. So our emergency fund came at I would say, halfway through COVID, where you saw every nonprofit in the world launch an emergency fund program. And we paused a little bit because, one, I had to make sure if we're going to offer one of these arms of support, we want to make sure we can sustain it. There's nothing worse than launching something, then pulling back for whatever the reason. So we thought long and hard about it, and I was like, families have emergencies every day. It could be a car accident, it could be anything, a pipe burst in a house, hurricane. So we wanted to make sure that we provided an opportunity for families to get support very quickly. So it's a super quick application process. There has to be a diagnosis in Duchenne, and then you have to tell us what your need is and provide a little bit of information. This supports food insecurity, utility bills, mortgage or rent support, and then there's the other. So if you have families that you ever meet that are out there that are just, I don't know what to do, this falls outside of their guidelines, I would encourage them to directly email me, because I handle gross majority of these types of supporting funding. So that's what that is. And then our newest arm was assistance funds. So equipment that's not covered by insurance, Hoyers. There's just a lot. And sometimes there's co-pays. So insurance will cover up to some point, but all of a sudden there's this major deductible that has to be covered. So that's all in, and there's a support there as well. So it's a program that, again, for the emergency support, I've turned around funding in an hour for families that are on eviction situations, or there was just an imminent need. Van broke down, medical appointment we need to get to. So we talk about transportation. We talk about how do we get lodging. So that one, I would say the best takeaway is if it's a quick hit and you need it, that's the one that's going to be a quick turnaround. Families have an option for that once a year. The accessible vehicle is an open and closed application process. We start it in October? End of October, and we award first week in January, so that there's a good runway for fundraising. So, any questions on any of those? I'm talking a lot. I'll try to speed up. Just a quote from one of our recipients. If you're not in the fundraising business, and that can be super overwhelming. We have staff. Julie is actually dedicated almost 100% of her time to helping families in this program throughout the year, and I get on calls with families with my director of development. So it kind of makes it a little bit more manageable in terms of how do you raise a big chunk of money like that. We have a community webinar series. And the next slide's about our community ambassadors. We have community ambassadors across the United States that are there to help chat with families, tell their experiences, provide support. A lot of families, Virginia, she's been around. She knows the ecosystem of Duchenne and can connect a lot of newly diagnosed families with support and just share experience. So that's important, but what happens with our ambassadors is we really use them as our eyes and ears on the ground. We want to know what the buzz is out in the community as best we can on the ground without us influencing it, and find out how or what sort of commonality or topics that we're hearing about so we can create a webinar and provide it to the community. So that's how those topics get picked. It's from the chatter that we're hearing amongst all of our volunteer ambassadors. The great thing about those is, time's of essence. People are busy. We recognize that. So all of those are added to our video library on our website. So moms, dads, caregivers, grandparents can access that information at their leisure as opposed to being on the actual call. A little bit about our ambassadors. As I said earlier, family support groups, moms out there, we have a group that's every 2 weeks that meet, and it's 25, 35 moms on a call. Whether you're newly diagnosed or you've been in it for a decade, 2 decades, you have a place to connect and support each other. We also do what we call, those are virtual porch nights. We've been doing this for quite some time, and we also do in-person ones. We're gonna be up to 4 next year, and those are regionally based, and that's, if you can envision our moms connecting with other moms on a condo on the beach, support, a hug, a cocktail, and a place to just be together. You like the cocktail too. We also have options for dads that want to connect with other dads. We do that. They have a Facebook group that is pretty active that we can connect dads with. So we're still trying to figure out the model for the dads. We did a virtual program when I first came on. I've been here about 5 years, so this is like year 1. And funny story, it was called Cheers and Beers. And I'm like, I don't know if I like that name, but it works. And there was a lot of guys. There was a dad from Alaska on, a guy from South Carolina, a guy from the West Coast. I'm like, this is amazing. And definitely different conversations than the moms. We're talking about how do I renovate my house? How do I afford this? I don't know if I can work any more than I'm already doing it. And so it was a different dialogue. But man, they had it on like a Sunday. There was sports going on, and it was like 6 hours long. I'm like, it was 11 o'clock at night. I'm like, I got to be done with this. I'm exhausted. And they had people popping in at all different hours. I'm like, oh my God. So we haven't really figured out that model. But if there are dads out there that are looking to talk to other dads, we can certainly help, or other caregivers that are guys. Many ways to stay connected, obviously with social media. We have tons of different outlets for our folks. And again, our sponsors, a big thank you. We partner with you. We hope you enjoy, learn from the community when we bring you together and take it back to your organizations. And we can't do it without you, so we appreciate you. We talked about our family workshops already. We already are locked into 3 or 4 for next year, but just gives you an idea, and that's why we're here today. And that's my ending. So thank you for being very patient as I ramble, but again, thank you all for being here, and I'll be around, so if you have anything that you'd like to talk about or want more information, just whatever it might be, please just grab me. I'm super approachable, I hope. That's the goal. Julie?
Thank you for that, Eric. So next we're going to have Dr. Reynolds, who's going to talk about the genetic therapies in Duchenne muscular dystrophy.
Hi, everyone. Tom Reynolds. I'm one of the pediatric neurologists here in Maine and have been in charge of our MDA clinic and our Duchenne clinic since 2012-ish. So I've been at this a little over a decade. This talk is going to teach you about the history of genetic therapy over the last decade or so, talk about what these different treatments are and what the future holds. I tell this story through the vein of multiple families that have come through my life and multiple coworkers that have come through my life. It's an intense story. There are some slides in here that will feel uncomfortable and some slides that will likely bring a tear to your eye a little bit, but that's okay. I hope that you enjoy this and that it's helpful for you. So I don't have any relevant financial relationships for this. I don't have to disclose anything in there. And there are lots of pictures and stories from patients and families who have given me permission to share their stories and their cases and their images as a part of this. So the objectives of this, right, my hope is that you'll walk out of here with an understanding of the importance of community and relationships, specifically in regard to what the process is like to move through doing something scary like genetic therapies. The importance of taking chances, both on the part of the healthcare team and the families who are a piece of that, and how important it is to stay informed. That's what reading the book is all about, right? You gotta stay informed, and most importantly, you gotta share your experiences with this. So we're gonna go backwards down the number line and start in around 2013 and work our way up to the current day as we talk through all of this stuff. So back in 2013, I was about 2 years into my practice here in Maine as a pediatric neurologist and learning to take over the Muscular Dystrophy Association clinic, the MDA clinic, from a prior colleague who had been running it for many years. And at that time, in 2013, I was just sort of learning about this, how to do this. You know, when you're in fellowship for training to become a pediatric neurologist, you learn so much, but like you really spend your entire career learning how to do this stuff. And so a very important family came into my life at that time, the Denger family, who are here today. So on the left up there is Brian Denger, the dad who introduced himself, and then we have Patrick and Matthew here, and Alice, their mom, in the picture on the floor. And so, as you heard, or may have heard already about PPMD, a lot of you guys already know that organization. Brian is a fierce advocate and plays a major role in PPMD. I met them when Matthew passed away in 2013 from cardiac complications from Duchenne. And, you know, Brian had sent a letter to this guy, Rich Peterson, who at the time was like the head of Maine Health, right, our huge hospital system. He's basically like, hey, like, get it together. Like, we need to have better care and better services for families in Maine who are affected by Duchenne. And so that really, like, got me moving in this area to try to, like, transform the MDA clinic into something that was a better place for families with Duchenne. These are some of my mentors who had been running the MDA clinic for many years, since like the 1980s. So the guy on the far left is Steve Rio, who's a pediatric neurologist. He's retired, and he had done, for like, I don't know, 25 years, he was like the only pediatric neurologist in Maine, like doing everything. Red Sullivan in the middle there was a neuromuscular adult neurologist, and the two of them ran a combined clinic in MDA for a long time, and were my primary mentors when I first came out of fellowship to try to take over for them. And the third guy, Kelly Sullivan, was the head of our practice for a long time, and sort of helped us to like make visions about how we were going to change care for the future. So back in 2013 and 2014, I had to figure out a way with Maine Health to like change this. And so the current model back then is actually the old model. And in that model, the patient and their family kind of moved around to different places. They would come to an MDA clinic where it would be a neurologist and a physical therapist, but they would really have to go elsewhere for the rest of their care. And there's lots written already at the time about like, hey, we need to make an ideal model, a better model of how do you move patients and families through care. And so the ideal model, right, encompasses all the different specialists, pulmonologists, cardiologists, neurologists, physiatrists, for the like the doctor part of it. Then obviously all the other allied health that's really important too, like physical therapy and speech therapy and nutrition and occupational therapy and orthotists, right? All the important folks that go into the care team for this. And so that was the idea, is like, how do we move into a better model? And so at the time I needed help with this, and this colleague of mine, Janice Dudley, who I had known since I was like a med student here. She came and joined us in neurology to help us start a Duchenne-specific clinic, right? To take the MDA clinic and kind of separate out Duchenne from it to make it its own thing within our multidisciplinary clinics. And we did similar work together for patient populations of families affected by spina bifida, as well as cerebral palsy. And Janice played a huge role in helping me to get this going back then. When you do a multidisciplinary clinic, especially one in which you might be doing genetic therapies, because right around this time was the original approvals for some of the oldest drugs we have now for various genetic therapies. You really need a physical therapist who understands how to do these really complex evaluations of different neuromuscular function, right? It's different than like an average PT visit. They were like the types of evaluations that were done during research trials, and in order to get insurance to pay for these things, you have to prove, right, that these genetic therapies are helping the patient, right? And so to do that, you need a physical therapist who's trained in all these specialty evaluations. And Caroline joined our team in 2015 and was like immediately excited and pumped to like learn all these different types of evaluations. And so over time, she developed expertise in 5 different specialized neuromuscular evaluations that are above and beyond what a regular pediatric physical therapist might do and are critical in sort of evaluating what happens to patients over time. So this slide, we don't have to spend a ton of time on this because a lot of people understand this and know this already, but I think it's important to put the context of what Duchenne is like over time because it helps you understand why gene therapies might work for different areas, and to also think about the focus of gene therapies not just on walking, which is a lot of like how we try to approve these things, on what the ambulatory status is like, but also how it might help people in other areas of their life, right? So it's an X-linked genetic disorder. I think everybody probably knows that here, right? It's almost exclusively boys who get affected by this, and moms are typically carriers. Sometimes there's a new mutation in a family, and so you're the first person in the family. Sometimes it's an uncle and a brother who are affected. You can have girls who are affected by this, but it's pretty rare. And moms who are carriers have to think about their own health with this. Dystrophinopathy just refers to the idea that the dystrophin protein is affected by this. It's a chronic progressive disease that eventually has very significant cardiopulmonary effect with these very elevated muscle enzyme levels. And then you do genetic testing, right, to figure out what kind of mutation you have, right, that causes the disease, whether it's Duchenne or Becker or somewhere in the middle of that. And so for the longest time, you know, as Eric was referencing earlier, we had steroids and that was it, right? And it was steroids to prolong ambulation was basically the rationale there. And then there were some other studies that looked at, all right, maybe steroids help in some other areas too. But supportive therapy was the other piece of this, right? And supportive therapy is like all those wraparound things in the ideal model that we were talking about before. But obviously it has major life expectancy things. And now we have gene therapies, and so we're gonna go through what those are and how this all works. So we're gonna start with exon skipping therapy. So these slides, these particular pictures, you don't have to be able to read everything. It's just, I wanted you to get a visual of what the map of dystrophin looks like from the exons themselves, right? And this comes from Parent Project Muscular Dystrophy, right? This is actually from a few years ago. Their website might actually look a little bit different from now, but that's when I captured this from a version of this talk back in 22. And so the important thing to think about here is understanding what in-frame and out-of-frame means when you hear, you know, medical providers talk about that, because that's how you figure out what type of muscular dystrophy or how severe or, you know, where you are on the spectrum of this. The general idea, right, if you look up here, right, is that these exons fit together in different ways. And so this map has like straight lines and then arrows in either direction. And if you're missing a certain exon, right, like let's say you're missing exon 41, 40 and 42 still kind of fit together, right? They have the same lines, but if you're missing 43, 44 and 42 don't really fit together well, So in-frame mutation is like when they kind of still fit together well, and it might be a little milder disease. And out of frame is when they don't fit together well, right? And that typically produces the Duchenne version of the disorder, right? And so what exon skipping therapy does in its basics is to try to skip over that part that doesn't fit together well so that you can create one that fits a little bit together, fits a little bit better together, right? And that way you might make a protein from that DNA that's a little bit more functional than when they don't fit together well, right? So that's the basics of what we're trying to do with exon skipping. And what is it that we actually do? So that it's, some crazy words here that everybody would have trouble pronouncing. So they say PMOs, right? We call them PMOs, but phosphorodiamidate morpholino oligomers, right? Very difficult to say. RNA is kind of like DNA inside our bodies, right? RNA is like what DNA kind of turns into a little bit in order to then make the protein. So it's part of like setting up the instructions inside the cell to take DNA and eventually get to a protein. And so what exon skipping does is take these PMOs, which are similar to RNA, and tries to deliver instructions inside the cell to make a slightly different protein, right? To make it this like slightly more functional protein than the one that's truly dysfunctional from the original mutation, right? So it skips over the missing piece, right? That's why we call it exon skipping, right? In order to try to make a slightly more functional protein. So this slide is from 2013, and this is the original clinical trial that looked at how does the first version of exon skipping therapy work. It's called eteplirsen or Exondys. And these slides, these are pictures of the actual muscle biopsies that the patients went through. And so the top slides up here, right, is before the treatment. You basically can't see any green in there, right? The green is like on a muscle biopsy. It's like the actual dystrophin being made. And so you can see after treatment at different doses, basically, patients started having more dystrophin being made on a muscle biopsy. So it's like this laboratory marker of, oh my God, this works, right? We can show that we can make protein that wasn't there before just by doing this therapy. And then this bottom one was the people who had delayed treatment or like started with a placebo and then got the treatment. So that's one of the ways that drug companies and researchers try to figure out if something works, right? You give some people, an active thing and some people a placebo, which is, nothing, right? But you don't know which one you're getting. And then after you just sort of figure out if it works, then you give the people who didn't get the active drug to see if it works for them too. And so that's basically what the slide shows. So this is like a major first thing of be like, oh my God, we have a genetic therapy that might actually do something here. And so this next slide looks at what's called the 6-meter walk test, right? And so what the 6-meter walk test is 6-minute walk test, excuse me, not 6 meter. 6-minute walk test is how many meters you can walk over 6 minutes. And so the upper line up here, the purple line is boys in the original study who received the exon skipping therapy and were able to show that their ambulation stayed relatively stable over time. And boys who were in the placebo arm started to decline. And then when they got the treatment, right, remember there was that lower slide that showed, oh yeah, they started with placebo and then they eventually got the drug. They started to stabilize out too, right? So that's what this lower line here is showing, is that, wait a minute, they eventually start stabilizing, right? So this is like critically important clinical information to try to pair up with the muscle biopsy information that occurred, right? This was like really, really controversial for a very specific reason. This was a very small study. And two of the boys, two twins who were in the study, they got removed from the data analysis after they stopped walking sooner than the rest of the boys who got the therapy. And so the FDA approved it, based on this study, those things I just showed you, the ambulation and the muscle biopsies. But like a lot of people around the country were really concerned about this. right? And I show this slide not to cast doubt on the use of this medication and this gene therapy, but to show you the kind of battles you have to fight amongst scientists and healthcare policymakers and insurance companies out there, right? Because you had, like, what the Duchenne community did to fight for getting access to this therapy got the FDA to approve it. But this slide here, this was a JAMA article. JAMA is like, you know, the biggest, sort of most important general medical journal that is out there in the United States. And so when people write editorials in JAMA, like, doctors listen, right? It's like a really big deal. And they wrote this line in here, which is important to sort of think. Patients with Duchenne need better treatments, and drugs like eteplirsen might someday fill that role. For now, though, the drug has provided a worrisome model for the next generation of molecularly targeted therapies, demonstrate a slight difference in a laboratory test, activate the patient community, win approval, charge high prices, relying on limited regulatory follow-up. Like, that is a damning statement about this process. And again, I'm not showing this because I agree with this. I'm showing this as an example of, like, what the community at large has to fight through, right, to get more and more access to these things as we have companies that are trying to produce these new genetic therapies. So, like, that's the background of what's going on as this gets approved, and we're trying to put together this, you know, Duchenne clinic, and how are we going to treat patients who, you know, want to get access to this new therapy, is that it's super controversial. So we get to December 2016, and Patrick comes back into my life at that point. And this was a really hard decision, but we elected to try to get him onto eteplirsen because he has a mutation that's amenable to exon 51 skipping therapy. So my experience is, you know, with Patrick, this is a really uncertain world that we were trying to navigate through, but it was really helpful for me as a clinician because this was my first experience prescribing a genetic therapy for a patient. And so, you know, we couldn't look at ambulation status, right, which is what it was approved on, even though it was approved for everybody, right? And so Patrick was a patient in whom he was already in a wheelchair, and we had to figure out, like, is this going to be helpful? We don't have other data yet. Nobody had produced or, you know, released the scientific information that said this drug will be helpful for other parts of Duchenne, right? So Patrick took a lot of chances with this. I took some chances with this, and it felt uncomfortable and uncertain, but we pushed forward and tried it out. And what we decided was we were going to measure different measures of function that were important, right? Remember that slide about Duchenne? It's all ambulation, but so many other important things. And so we talked about hand function being really critical, right? Can we measure hand function for him in different ways over the years ahead? And can we measure his cardiopulmonary function to try to show that this intervention we were giving him was making a difference for him? We'll come back to that a little bit later on. I wanted to show you another patient from around this time. So this is in 2016 as well. This is Michael Norton. Michael has Duchenne as well, but was not amenable to exon skipping therapy. Michael and Patrick were about the same age around this time. Maybe Michael was a little bit older, maybe about 5 years older or so, I think. But Michael was a really important patient to me as well, and we couldn't give him any sort of genetic therapy. But I want to show you a few things about why he's important, because I think it's a really inspiring story, and I hope that some of the families here can take some from this. So Michael was an artist, like an incredible artist. And he had this brother who was not affected by Duchenne. And I'm going to show you a trailer from the documentary he made. It's really moving. This is part of the sad part that I was talking about before. So let me just get out of this for a moment to start this movie. So this documentary he made is called Brothers. It's obviously the story of these two brothers, but it's a much larger story about family and community as well.
We've been through ups and downs most of our life,
6 minutes.
and we just We're not gonna take it. We're gonna go out this world fighting. Yeah, we don't give up here.
Brothers don't always get along. They don't always like each other. JT, as the younger brother, was already somewhat of a caregiver from an early age. Those two were just inseparable.
We were like, I would say the total opposite. He was into skateboarding, outdoors, and I was into art and heavy metal music. We became really close and we stayed by each other's side.
Here's a kid in a motorized wheelchair and a kid riding a skateboard behind him. JT just was like blazing a trail and people followed.
His level of progression was beyond everybody else's. He got so good so fast.
We were in Portland one time and we came to the stair set. It was a 9-stair to 11. We all thought it was nearly impossible. And we watched John do it and over and over, just keep slamming and slamming and slamming. And he finally pulled it. Everything that you think is impossible, you pull it off.
There aren't many people like JT that you come in contact with, and if you do come in contact with someone like him, you're fortunate. As open and loving as JT was for everyone else, he had his own turmoil inside.
He wrote something one time about the figment of his imagination versus reality. He didn't know where the line was sometimes. He said, "Mom, what if I get trapped in hell and the doors close forever and I can never get out?" I don't know how to answer that.
Schizophrenia is one of the most serious mental illnesses that we face in behavioral health. This is an illness that really tears families apart.
It's easy to take care of Michael, but we couldn't take care of JT, except to love him, you know. He knew we loved him, I know that, but we couldn't fix him.
I knew something was going on because his behaviors were very alarming that week. It was JT's choice to stop his medication, and unfortunately the consequences were not good, but it was still his choice.
Well, I get a text from somebody that said, "Did you know John Norton?" And I said, "What do you mean, did know?" And like, right then and there, like, my heart dropped. I just can't imagine the pain that he was in.
During the last months of college, my brother took his life. I had realized that I should make a documentary about my brother.
I think Michael is a very realistic person. He knows his limitations, and he knows when JT left this world, there was nothing he could do about it. He's decided to do something to honor his brother.
Sharing John's story and all of our stories, it needs to be talked about. It's something that I feel is kind of swept under the rug and no one really wants to deal with, but it's a huge issue within our community.
We all think we're invincible when we're kids, and growing up, we don't think anything's really gonna happen to us.
We need more families like this one that are willing and have the courage to face this and to address it.
When people talk about JT, or if they, they know that kind of what our family's going through and stuff, and I'll say, but I said, Michael's working on a really incredible project. So that kind of turns it around to like uplift.
I think the fact I've been through a lot of stuff definitely helps me going forward. And art helps. Makes me feel like I'm not the only one going through things. Other people are too.
Working with these families, you have to help prepare them for the idea that their son is, may die at a very early age. But to have that happen for an entirely different reason in the same family, to have a terrible mental illness like schizophrenia affect the other son, it's just devastating. Any other rational, sane human being might have been tempted to give up on their own if they'd seen that happen to their brother. And, I don't think that's going to happen to Michael. I think even though he is limited in his weakness, he's so strong psychologically and mentally.
He wants to definitely leave an impression on this world before he goes, and he's quite aware of that.
So we're going over proposals for a possible sculpture at the Johnson Field Skate Park in honor of JT. I want him to look like he's watching over the park.
JT came to the Parks and Recreation Committee meeting. I believe he was in either 7th or 8th grade at the time, and did a presentation about the need for a skate park. We immediately agreed that we wanted to take it on as a cause.
He left such an impact when he was here that the impact now that he's gone, I feel like just reverberates.
JT was that one person that would give a helping hand for anybody, and I think about that all the time, and I want to be the same way, you know. He'll be a legend forever in this town and community.
It's okay to be sad sometimes, you know. It's just life. You have to have the darkness to appreciate the light, I guess, and, you know. I just feel like people need to have a little bit of happiness in their grief.
You can't dwell on the negativity of the situation, because if you do, you'll never get out of it. We got to take care of this. We got to, you know, pull together as a family.
JT always said, even in some of his writings, he said that his brother would always be at the front of his mind no matter where he was, because he loved his brother that much. I believe they saved each other.
If you're interested in watching the full version of it, it's about 90 minutes long. There's a website that you can go to, and I think it's like $3.99 or something to download, like to stream it basically. It's not through like Netflix or anything like that. You got to go to their website. But the whole documentary is obviously amazing and totally worth watching. Very, very, very moving, obviously. All right. So, in 2019, right, that was around the time that documentary had come out, and you know, Michael and his mom Susan in particular really activated the community around them with that, and so like it was a really important part of what I was talking about before with community and how important community is to the Duchenne families out there, and so. I want to come back to some of the science around genetic therapies now. This is all at the same time. This is the long-term follow-up on those original boys who went through the eteplirsen trial earlier in the 2010s. And so the graph on the left represents the original ambulatory status throughout the study and at 48 weeks, including the two twins who were removed from the original analysis. So the yellow and green lines are the two twins who, you know, had come out of the analysis and was like such a controversial thing for the original approval, but like so critical, right? Look at these cardiopulmonary measurements. Those two twins stayed stable with the other boys who had received the initial therapy, right? Exactly the thing that Patrick and I were trying to figure out when we put him on the therapies. Would this be helpful for things that we don't have the science yet? We don't know the data yet at the time that we started it. And sure enough, you know, we get some science a few years later that show that it looks like it's helping in preserving cardiopulmonary function over time too. At the same time as this, there's this critical approval of a gene therapy for another disorder. A lot of you probably know what spinal muscular atrophy is. It's called SMA for short. It's another MDA clinic diagnosis. Neuromuscular diagnosis, affects boys and girls, starts in childhood, relentlessly progressive, and a different company was able to show that you could use this thing called AAV therapy, right, which is using a vector, a virus, to insert genetic material and change the protein production. And so in 2019, the FDA approves the use of this gene therapy for SMA, which is really, really critical stage in like neuromuscular medicine as a whole. So what is AAV gene therapy? Because that's what the new gene therapy is, similar to what is approved for Duchenne. So AAV stands for adeno-associated virus, and this is the most commonly used vector to deliver what's called a transgene. And a transgene is just DNA that you're trying to insert into the human DNA to make it more functional. It's just a word for what that DNA is. And so when it goes into the cell, it's got to cross into the nucleus, and then it gets called an episome. Again, it's like just the word for it, but the basics of it are that we're putting functional DNA into the nucleus, right, to try to produce the actual protein, the dystrophin protein for Duchenne, or the SMN protein for spinal muscular atrophy, which is what this 2019 study did. And so the idea is to produce the protein that is dysfunctional and missing. And this is from the Sarepta website, right? This is like the graphic picture of what that process is. And so, you know, you've got your, I don't know if I have my arrow, there it is. The vector with the DNA in it that comes in. You have something called a promoter, which helps like make that DNA start to be functional. The transgene, right, which makes the actual protein. And then the virus, the vector itself leaves again afterwards, right? That's the idea, that the virus itself goes away at some point. So this is like a slide just to show you about like what AAV, because we've known about AAV for a long time as a potential like genetic tool. So AAV was discovered in 1965. Its use as a vector was in 1984. In the late 90s, we actually started using it in clinical trials in humans, but there were some high-profile deaths in the clinical trials, and everybody backed way off of AAV at that point, and it took a long time to start using it again until the 2010s to be able to like feel safe using it in humans. At the same time, the dystrophin part of this is on the other side, right? So, you know, if you go all the way back to the 1800s is when Duchenne is sort of first described. 1987 is when we first understand that the dystrophin protein is the problem and the DNA for it. And then we realized that there was truncated dystrophin over time too, right? And so we start trying to produce smaller versions. That U there, the U dys, means microdystrophin. So dystrophin is this like enormous protein. And that other gene therapy I was talking about for SMA is a tiny protein. So the vector can insert tiny pieces of DNA, and the dystrophin protein, the DNA for that is like way too big to put into the AAV vector. And so what scientists had to do is figure out how to get a smaller version of dystrophin that's still functional into the vector to then be inserted into the cell of the human. And this is kind of a cool thing that people realize that microdystrophin, these tiny dystrophin, could work because there are some people out there with a version of Becker's that's like incredibly mild and looks really sort of typically functioning, but they have these huge mutations and are missing a huge part of the dystrophin gene. So that's how people realize, wait a minute, maybe we can insert a smaller version of the gene to actually be functional for this, because you can't insert the whole gene, it's just too big to put into the vector. And so we get out to 2018, and that's when we started like actually administering this in humans, clinical trial. It's 2019, 2020 now. I want to come back to Michael. Sorry. This part always gets me. Susan asked me to speak at his funeral, so I just want to read a little bit what I read that day. So Mike and I first got to know each other better back in 2014, a few years after I started taking over the care of the MDA clinic from Dr. Rio, my mentor I showed you in the first slide. I've met a lot of amazing people and families over the years, but no one ever quite moved me as much as Mike did. I'd never met someone before who embraced life quite as much. He referred to himself as the disabled crip, and he could show me where art, heavy metal, chaos, and everything meet. He had these little business cards that he would hand out with that written on it. Michael transformed me after meeting him and working with him. Sorry, I'm gonna get my arrow back here. Where the heck? Where'd it go? Yeah, there we go. Got it. Thank you. Sorry about that. Give me a moment to catch my breath there anyways. So I began to realize that the MDA clinic, especially for young men like Michael, was not necessarily a place where they came for diagnosis or treatment in the standard way that people think about doctor's visits. Sure, there were actionable things that came out of those visits, prescriptions for new wheelchairs or equipment to help with care, referral for physical therapy, advice about cardiac or respiratory treatments. What I realized those visits were really about was the opportunity for me to learn about disability, to truly understand muscular dystrophy, particularly Duchenne, the type Michael had, and how it changes a family. After working with Michael and Susan for the first few years, we were in this old MDA clinic. This was before the transformation. It was in this musty basement of a hospital building. It was kind of gross. I realized like I couldn't wait for the opportunity to come up to see him again. You know, I would see him every 6 months, and like when his visits were coming up, I would be so excited. Sure, like most other doctors, I relished the opportunity to see patients I really personally connected with, and you know, he was one of these. But something was different about the visits with Mike and Susan. Despite the sadness of seeing his disease progress over time, I found myself smiling and laughing more with Michael than I did in other parts of my life. I realized over time that our roles had reversed. Michael and Susan weren't coming to clinic because I was helping them. They were coming to clinic to help me. So it's an important part of what this community is for Duchenne, that you have people out there that you care about a lot. All right. So this is our new clinic. These are my current partners in crime for this. They're sitting up here in the front table, Rachel and Alana. And we're at 92 Campus Drive over in Scarborough. Those of you who are patients in the room, you've been there many times at this point. We opened that building in 2021, and then we were able to raise some money to name the multidisciplinary workspace after Dr. Rio, who, as I said before, was kind of the sole person taking care of all of the Duchenne families since like the mid-'80s up until I took over from him. So thank you guys for being here, keeping me straight. 2021 follow-up. So again, some long-term data to look at from that Eteplirsen study, the exon 51 study. So these are two different graphic representations of the long-term ambulatory function of the 12 boys originally treated with Eteplirsen at 4 years out. So 4 years later now as compared to historical controls. And what these two graphs show basically is that the ambulation in treatment groups is much longer than the ambulation in historical controls. So the blue and green lines, the blue lines are the boys who got treated with Eteplirsen, and this is that 6-minute walk test. And so they're all staying ambulatory out here, where all the historical controls that were supposed to like match them, like theoretically be the same type of patient, their ambulation starts declining much earlier. So in addition to that original 48 weeks, sort of less than a year study of ambulation, now we have 4-year data that shows that ambulation is prolonged. In addition to the data I showed you earlier about cardiopulmonary function looking like it was preserved. And what do you know? We have other exons that are amenable to exon skipping as well. So there were a couple more that were approved in 2019 and 2021 for other versions, exon 53 and exon 45 skipping. And that is another 8% each of patients affected by Duchenne. So it's 13% that is affected, but could be amenable to 51. And so you add these in, you get up to around 28% of boys out there who might be amenable to using these approved skipping therapies. And then here we are in 2023, and we get approval of Elevidys, right? The AAV gene therapy for Duchenne muscular dystrophy, right? Critical step. So how do we figure out which patients can get this? This is we're actively working through this right now across the country, right? Some of our major centers out there, right, where the research is being done are ahead of places like us in Maine, right, where we're more of a community children's hospital. We're trying to get these things going in our patients. So certain patients you can't use this in. You have to exclude patients who have deletions of exons 8 and 9 because there was this very significant cardiac complication that came about during the research trial. And there might be mutations in other exons that could be at risk for that. So I think the jury's probably still a little bit out on that, but we have to be very careful if you're going to try to prescribe it for those other mutations listed here. And critically, you can't have antibodies to the vector, right? So it's a virus, and if you have antibodies to that virus, then your immune system is going to basically like overwhelm your body in response to fighting that vector. And then there's like major problems with the liver and other issues that are really difficult. And so if you have antibodies greater than 1 to 400, you can't do it. The good news about that particular part is it looks like the vector itself is chosen because there's relatively little actual antibody out there, right? Now, some people are going to have been exposed to it, and it just is what it is. But it looks like, hopefully that particular vector is not going to have too many people who have antibodies to it. The longer you're out in the world, though, right, the more viruses you get exposed to and the more antibodies you have in your body. You can't have any active infections at the time of the treatment for this. If you were to go into gene therapy, like there's a number of other viruses you got to test negative for at the time, because if your immune system is revved up, it's going to cause problems when you insert this other virus. And you've got to do all vaccines before you receive the actual gene therapy for like a 5-year-old or a 6-year-old boy. This is a slide from an article that came out this year, written by a number of sort of leading investigators from around the country who were parts of the clinical trial for this. And this graphic is basically like, it's called practical considerations in using gene therapy. And so it's to teach people like me and our clinic here and other places around the country, how are we actually going to do this? How are we going to prepare families for this? And so we got to be checking these liver function tests at the beginning and all throughout the study. We got to be checking cardiac tests because there's risk for some heart issues. You got to be looking at your platelets, which is one of the clotting things inside your blood. And you got to give these whopping big doses of steroids, like just before the treatment starts, and then throughout the duration of about 3 months afterwards. That's when you have this like major risk for these different problems from an immune system reaction to receiving this vector, this virus. So there's not too much detail to go into here. You can't really see the words here, but the basics of it are, if you were to do this, you got to be prepared to be on higher doses of steroids and the problems that could come around from being on higher doses of steroids. We all know that steroids can be difficult treatment to tolerate because of the side effects. And this slide shows you the different types of adverse events that were seen in the clinical trial and how we try to observe for these things and prevent them from happening. So in the first couple of weeks here, right after infusion, right, the purple ones are kind of the scary ones. The blue ones are the more minor ones. So myocarditis, one patient had myocarditis, but you don't want myocarditis, right? That's like major inflammation of the heart and is a very scary thing. And the two in the vomiting were very severe vomitings that like required hospitalization. But you can see like 98 people had more milder version of vomiting. So like vomiting is gonna happen if you get this and you get put on Zofran to manage it. And it seems for most people to work well. And then as you get farther out, a few months after therapy, right, the 2 to 3 month range is when you can start seeing the liver stuff, right? Again, only 2 patients with increased numbers and 1 with liver injury. But still, it's kind of like the heart. You don't want to be having a major long-term problem with your liver as a consequence of this. And then a couple of patients with something called rhabdomyolysis, which is when the skeletal muscle itself gets really inflamed and breaks down even more than it would typically, from the Duchenne itself. So there are issues, right? These are not easy things, but they are manageable, right? And giving it onto the high-dose steroids and doing careful laboratory monitoring and really close follow-up will make it possible. All right, so I want to finish with a couple of things about what the future holds. Future potential genetic therapies that are on the horizon for this as well. So the first idea is to look at something called gene editing. People have maybe read about CRISPR before, like sometimes it's like in the New York Times or in other, sort of major media publications about what it is. CRISPR is like an immune system for microbes, and it incorporates foreign DNA into its own to like establish a memory. And gene editing using CRISPR tries to like recognize the mutated gene, the problem inside dystrophin, and then insert, a more functional gene. So it's kind of similar to this idea of vector, but a different type of manipulation of the DNA inside the cell. And so this picture represents like different potential ways CRISPR might be used in things like exon skipping or deletion or reframing, editing the bases themselves, right? So just know that like CRISPR is this huge box of stuff that for many different genetic therapies people are using out there, and it's likely that it will be something that we use in Duchenne at some point in the future, like clinically. Stem cells, right? So stem cell transplant is actually used not in Duchenne now, but in other disorders that are sort of genetically based, right? Different disorders that you might try to knock out a patient's bone marrow, for instance, and give them new bone marrow, right? That's kind of like, a version of stem cell therapy that we use already in medicine regularly in different kinds of cancers and other genetic treatments. And so theoretically, maybe we can use CRISPR to put the correct DNA in a patient's own myoblasts, which are like the precursor muscle cells, and maybe try to change it that way. So there could be some stem cell therapy in the future for this. There's something called exon skipping 2.0. Thank you. What this idea is the next version of exon skipping, right? And so remember the PMO word from before? So PPMO is what this is, and you're binding another protein to it called a peptide to the PMO, and the idea there is that it makes it get into the nucleus easier and better and more functional. So maybe this version of exon skipping is going to work better than the first version that we currently use. It's ongoing to try to figure that out. And then I always throw this in because this is important. This is about steroids, right? This is like, still a mainstay of treatment for us. And this is a study from out of Nationwide that looked at giving steroids much earlier than we typically do, right? So typically we start the steroids, at age 5 or 6, right? When you have like the beginnings of some sort of plateauing, right? Because there's so many side effects from it. And sometimes in decades past, we wouldn't know about all the boys with Duchenne until they were 5 or 6, unless they happened to be the younger brother of a patient already affected, right? Or the nephew of a patient already affected, right? So what this study shows is that boys in this group here, so this GMSS is like one of those physical therapy scales that are really important. And so the boys who were a toddler or an infant, who had a more delayed, like they really looked delayed with their motor skills, if you started giving them prednisone earlier, they made these big jumps in their motor skills. So like this is something that may very well be another therapy. It's not gene therapy, but I put it in here because it's like we're still studying the thing that we've known for 4 decades to be an important 5 decades. I think it's been since the 70s that we've been giving steroids regularly, right? So there's still stuff to learn with like most basic therapy out there. So in conclusion, right, we've got a bunch of FDA-approved therapies, right? We have different types of steroids. I didn't get into deflazacort or vamorolone at all, but those are, important newer therapies. Givinostat is a new therapy. It's totally different. It's this thing called a histone deacetylase inhibitor. We're not going to get into that too much today, but know that that's a recently approved thing as well. It helps to try to clean up some of the inflammation in the muscles. And then we've got 3 different exon skipping therapies for 29% of mutations, and then the newly approved AAV therapy. And then we've got these like advanced versions of exon skipping coming, gene editing, maybe stem cell therapy. And then a whole another group, which is like therapies at how do we make muscle grow in other ways or protect muscle in other ways. And that obviously I didn't even cover at all, but there's definitely places to learn about that through PPMD or even through Sarepta's website, right, where you can learn about that stuff pretty quickly. So in conclusion, right, to come back to my objective, my hope that you took out of this talk the importance of community and relationships, and that building it with your doctors and your nurses and your therapists inside your circles, right? You can't do this on your own. You gotta have support. You gotta take chances. You gotta be willing to enter clinical trial sometimes, right? And you might be the first person in your community to receive a genetic therapy, and that's okay, right? You gotta stay on top of the information. Like we always try to do that, but I can't tell you the number of times that a patient or a parent has come to me and said, look at this study. This is important. Do you know about this yet? And I love it when people do that, right? Because it forces me into making myself to be more informed, right? So it's critical that you guys stay on top of your understanding of this and bring it to us as well, and then sharing your experience, right? Whether it's good or bad, right? We all learn from each other. So these are just some of the folks who are part of that journey over this last 11, 12 years or so. Thank you.
I don't have a question, but I'd like to unpack a little bit about these decisions that families need to make about these new therapies and the value judgments that are part of that process. Dr. Ronald has mentioned some of that with his clinical background and with your family experience, you bring the two together to make a decision of what risk is acceptable to you, understanding that many of these therapies, the benefit can be exceptionally modest. But what does that mean? Does that mean you shouldn't do it? Well, the benefit of steroids is short-term and modest. But the prolonging of ambulation leads to better development of trunk strength for someone with Duchenne. And it may prevent the need for spinal surgery later on for scoliosis. The same can be true with these exon-skipping therapies. The benefit might be modest initially, but we don't know short-term what the benefit is to upper body ability. Son Patrick is 30. He still drives. He's a gamer streamer, and his ability that he wants to preserve are his hand and arm function. And we have to think that part of that is by him being treated by exon-skipping therapists. I think that the best thing to do as a family is to have these conversations with your interdisciplinary professional team who is responsible for Duchenne care, and tell them what your concerns are, what your hopes are for the initiation of these therapies, and whether those can be combined to provide the benefit. I think those are really practical considerations, because not every family is willing to undertake the risk, for example, of gene therapy, because when you infuse a body with these trillions of viral particles, there is going to be an immune response, and how each patient reacts to that can be very different. But with an experienced team and with proper understanding, you can be prepared for some of those negative side effects. This is true of any medication, whether you take a hypertension medication or any other therapy. There's a risk-benefit decision that needs to be made. I think that interacting with your professional clinical team is important to be able to understand how that therapy may work and whether the benefits meet the goals.
It's great, Brian. Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. Did you? It's a really important question that geneticists and ethicists have been struggling, not with just Duchenne, but like genetic testing in general for many decades, right? Because we started doing DNA testing and research in the 1980s, right? And there's other disorders out there that are degenerative and maybe don't have a treatment, but the reproductive health understandings and the implications for girls and women in particular is really important. I personally believe in helping a family navigate that to their desires, right? Some families really want to get their girls tested early on, and what I do in clinic is talk to them about that and what are the pluses and minuses of doing that, what are the potential psychological effects on that child's development, on that family's development, what are the benefits of doing it, right? And in some families we test earlier, and in some we wait until after puberty, and when that reproductive health question is like really important, And, some people don't want to know at all what that is, right? I mean, that's okay for a family to choose not to do it also. And I think what's really important is to educate people and talk them through what it means to get genetic testing done. And that's not just about Duchenne. I mean, this is like a constant discussion in the neurology clinic in general, right? It's a hard question, but I think we should test earlier, but I don't want to impose my values onto people who, maybe don't want to do it. So.
What is the mosaic aspect?
Mosaicism refers to, it's like a general genetic concept where maybe certain cells in the body might be affected and others aren't, and then maybe you can't really tell. So there's a classic example called gonadal mosaicism or germline mosaicism, and that's the idea that you can't see the mutation on your blood or your saliva, but maybe it's in your sperm or your eggs, right? And so, in certain Duchenne situations, right, maybe it would be, in the eggs, alone, because it's obviously not usually coming through the paternal side of the family. So, but it's not just for Duchenne, it's really for any genetic condition.
There we go. Thank you so much, Dr. Reynolds. Right now have Dr. Anna Sullivan coming up for Maximizing Physical Therapy for Duchenne. So let me just get that set up. There we go. Perfect.
Just this little button there. Yeah, that's probably it. Can I set that? I'll leave that. Oh, yeah. Okay. Hello. I'm Anna Sullivan, and I'm a physical therapist at Penn Bay Medical Center in Rockport. I've been working there for about 13 years now, and I have 4 patients with Duchenne that I work with regularly, and then previous to that, during clinical rotations and through some travel and practice at other clinics across the country, I've been able to work with maybe 4 or 5 other patients with Duchenne, and was able to learn a lot from their cases and what they received and didn't receive. So just a little bit about me. I went to Husson University in Bangor, which is a bit north of here, and got my doctorate degree in 2011. And then I've worked in pediatrics since then at Penn Bay Medical Center. And then before college, I had a long history of working with children and families in general in the community, especially through the YMCA. And I learned I really enjoyed working with the children and families, and the creativity that is required to work with children. And teamwork is probably my favorite part of the job, and being able to communicate with community providers and other medical providers has been really helpful for me in my day-to-day work. And then, of course, I have a lot of pets, and I love to be outdoors and or in my shop woodworking, and it's just probably my happiest place is to have my pets gathered with me and be somewhere with them. So I feel really strongly that everyone should get to experience their happiest place, and there should not be physical barriers to that. So it's a bit of my mission to make that happen, and my coworkers would probably roll their eyes at this point and say oh geez, there she goes again, because if somebody wants to do it, then I want to make it happen. So yeah, so that's my mission. I wanted to talk today about a few things and how important it is to have a physical therapist who's familiar with Duchenne, specifically a pediatric physical therapist, because like Dr. Reynolds was saying, the difference between just general physical therapy and a pediatric physical therapist is huge. And perhaps there are more things than what a general physical therapist might approach, and potential missed opportunities by not being able to find a pediatric physical therapist. So I know here in Maine it's really hard to have access to physical therapy, and I don't know how that is really across the country. So I encourage after today at all, if anyone has any questions or has a physical therapist or any providers that want to reach out, I'd be happy to spend time chatting with them and offering anything that I can to help the journey of any level, whether you're just starting out or you're further along in your Duchenne journey. Please reach out. So the goal of physical therapy, how can you get the most from physical therapy, and then what might be expected of you from a physical therapist. So the goal of physical therapy is to maintain and prolong functional mobility at whatever level that is, whether we're still walking or you're using a power chair, you're wanting to learn how to drive a vehicle, access your work as an adult. All of those pieces come into physical therapy and functional mobility. And I think we focus a lot on ambulation, but there's a whole world outside of ambulation that is really important also. So we do that by doing a lot of stretching, some gentle strengthening, and you'll have a mix of clinical visits, home exercise programs. There's a whole world of equipment out there that we can access, and then managing splints and orthotics. So the best ways to get the most from PT is really communication, and I'll probably say communication 500 more times, because I have a plan, and every time I see a patient, I'm informally reassessing them, and I'm watching them walk down the hallway, drive down the hallway. How are they sitting in their wheelchair? How are they transferring? And I make changes to their home exercise programs or changes to our goals or our treatment approaches every single time. And if my goals are like mine, and then your goals are yours, and we don't align those, then chances are none of those things are actually really going to be all that helpful. So if there's a barrier at home that I don't know about, I can't help, and I might overprescribe something or underprescribe something. If there's concerns that I don't know about, then I won't know to address them. So communicating with your physical therapist about anything and everything is completely fine. And once you find a physical therapist, that's the person you see the most for medical providers are your physical therapist. And sometimes we're spending 2 or 3 hours a week together, and so we get to know each other really well. So it's really good to let me know what's going on at home so that we can work together to have the best success. And then equally, if something's being successful, then let me know so I don't change it and tell you like, oh, actually we're gonna do this, and that's not helpful at all, because what you're doing was actually working for you. So your frequency of visits with a physical therapist will probably depend on how can you access them. Are they far away? Are they nearby? How things are going at home. Where you're at with mobility. If things are really stable, then we might decrease visits so that you're not having to have medical visits constantly throughout the week. If there's been some challenges, we might increase your visits so that we can readdress and assess what's going on. So if your physical therapist has sort of settled into this is your time every week, no matter what, then it's okay to say, hey, things are actually going really well. We'd like to take a break, and that should be a conversation that they're open to. So during a clinical visit, because working with kids, we try to make it as fun as possible. We're gonna do a lot of manual therapy, gentle strengthening, which is one of the reasons it's important to find a pediatric physical therapist, because strengthening with Duchenne is not more is better, and it's important to recognize when a child is fatigued and not push them beyond that. So, because we can actually cause harm to the muscles and cause progression faster than we're actually helping. So if a kid is highly competitive with especially their peers, then we try and help them learn your body's tired, it's okay to rest, and find other competitive outlets for them so that they can experience the joy of competition without it being a physical aspect. And we'll work on a lot of balance, active stretching, and try to have a lot of fun. So we do all of these interventions at every functional level. So if someone's not walking anymore, then I'm going to work on their balance in wherever position they're spending most of their time to try and maintain as much core strength as possible so that we can support respiratory health and cardiac health. So the expectations that a PT is going to have from their patient is generally commitment to the home exercise program. If you are coming into the clinic even fairly regularly, what we can do in an hour is not going to do much if there's 23 hours of the day that things aren't being done. So we really do support committing to a home exercise program. And then that being said, we need it to work into your day. So we could provide like endless activities and exercises for you to do all day long. Whether you wake up in the morning and we're like, all right, do this and do this. And if that's too much, then you have to let us know, because there's a minimum, there's a maximum, and then there's ideal. And our goal is to get into the ideal. And that's different for everyone. Some kids tolerate everything and they do great with it all, and there's no complaints, and I'm not sure how that is. And then other kids complain about everything and really give me a run for my money. And we have to spend a lot of time playing Minecraft and Pokemon Go, and my coworkers and colleagues will see me pushing kids around our facility to play Pokemon Go while they're in their stander or while we're doing an activity. So anything we can do to engage kids and make home exercise programs and exercising more fun, we will do. So if you need a Pokemon Go friend, I'm your person, because I'm really good at it. And I always respond to gifts. So if you I'll send you back so you can get stuff. And the kids really love it. So, and it gives them something to look forward to when they come into the clinic, that they're like, did you get this one? They're like, I saw you got this one. I'm like, yeah. So if you have that person in your life who can sort of be the bad cop, good cop, and you can say, Anna said, you have to do this. So what game are we going to play while we do this today? It makes it maybe a little bit easier, because there are then interventions that we want to get started as early as possible. Really, as soon as you get diagnosis, we want to start wearing nighttime AFOs to preserve range of motion in the heel cords and ankles, because some kids that I've worked with have stopped walking at age 6, not because their muscles were weak, but because they got really tight and they just didn't have the range of motion to be up on their feet anymore. I've had really good success using standing frames with kids as soon as they're diagnosed, so that they're weight bearing through their joints and muscles, because their body weight's going to do a lot more than I can do with manual therapy. And those are not easy things. So if we can start it early, then AFOs going on at night is no different than putting on pajamas and brushing teeth. It's just a part of the day. And if we do it before they have lost range of motion or before they're tight, then they aren't ever really experiencing the discomfort of stretching, because stretching isn't terribly comfortable. And it's not very nice to say, go to bed with this uncomfortable thing and expect them to sleep all night. So if we can start that early, it's really helpful. And general physical therapists may not know that, or they may say, oh, well, you know, they're probably going to get tight anyway, so there's not really any point in it. And I have to disagree, because anecdotally, I've really found it makes such a huge difference. And even after walking, if you can maintain range of motion, it makes daily care easier. It prevents injury during transfers and care if you're not quite so tight. So commitment to that home exercise program is really important, and working it into your day and having your physical therapist help you do that is great. Let's see. And then openness to learning. Like Dr. Reynolds said, I'm learning every day. Patients are constantly bringing things into me, Duchenne or unrelated to Duchenne, about, you know, did you see this? Did you know this exists? And I was like, I didn't. So it's really exciting when I get to learn something new, and I enjoy sharing my knowledge to try and help others. So just openness to the potential changes that are going to come, and having your physical therapist know what is expected of us, because you're not the only one that gets to have expectations. So you get to expect things from us, and that is communication with you, with providers, because we often then are the person that sees you the most and learns something, and I say, you know, Dr. Reynolds might like to know this. Is it okay if I talk to him and share this? Because sometimes you go into clinic and there's so many things to cover, and it's like, oh shoot, I forgot about that, and I didn't get to tell him that. And that's something your physical therapist can help bridge those gaps. The same with school. School is a whole other environment that may or may not, things may not be happening quite the way we would want them to, or the school therapist just isn't familiar with how to integrate medical needs into the education environment. And that is a really challenging place. So that's something that your physical therapist can also communicate with them about. And then the community. The community is so much fun, because it's not often accessible, but it's can be. And a lot of places are open to accessibility and changing so that they can be accessible, but they don't know until the physical therapist comes in and says, just do this, and then it will be accessible. And I love to do that. So, and most places are really open to it. But so those are places that you should expect your physical therapist to do. And if they're not, it's okay to ask and say, hey, could you communicate with this person? Could you come here, check out this environment? Because we have a family reunion at this place that's local to you. Can you please go and see or talk to them and find out how can this be accessible? School field trips are generally not accessible. So I've gone on field trips with my patients so that I can help do their transfers, because nobody was comfortable transferring them to the boat that everyone else was riding on, and like they're going on the boat. So let's get everybody to help them do that. And if I don't push, then a lot of times, sometimes kids are left behind, or they have to do an alternative activity that's not as much fun. And that's not okay with me. So it's okay to ask your physical therapist to try and help support these things in one way or another. And then they'll guide you through your home exercise program and change that appropriately. Using mobility equipment. So again, the stander, starting a stander early, so even after you're not walking anymore, you're getting up and weight bearing through your bones, you're getting your muscles stretched so you can lay in bed more comfortably because you haven't gotten quite so tight. Or it's easier to just do personal care and hygiene because your limbs aren't tight. And then with medications now and the treatments that are coming out, I have this hope that maybe we don't know that walking is going to stop by a certain age, that we're extending this so much longer. But if we get tight, then it's that much harder to take advantage of those things. So really maintaining range of motion is so important. And that happens across environments. And managing barriers. Just let us know about the barriers. So we know that there's common patterns for muscular dystrophy: tightness in the ankles, knees, hips, and upper extremities. So we just want to start it early. Just start all of the treatments early and starting them before they're technically needed, so we aren't trying to catch up. We're staying ahead of everything. Start early. Again, I think we've pretty well covered all of that. So when is it time for power mobility or an assisted mobility device? Because not everybody gets their license right away to drive. Just depends. I have some kids who had to wait a little bit until they were a little older so they wouldn't run people down, accidentally, of course, but it's most of the time. It's technically when the patient is no longer able to walk functional distances within their home is generally, at least in Maine, what insurances care about. There's a lot of places to go that are not in your home, but when I write for a power chair, I have to write it for the home. But we have these great assessments that can give us an idea of this person is not going to be walking, maybe within 6 months to a year. And it just so happens that sometimes it can take 6 months to a year to get a power chair, and it can take a really long time. Part of this is just dependent on what the home environment is, and is it accessible? And then it comes to your physical therapist helping you prepare for that ahead of time. So thinking about, gosh, we're maybe a couple years away from needing a power chair. It could take a couple of years to make your home accessible, to get a ramp, to move a bedroom downstairs, to have an accessible bathroom. So if all of those pieces aren't done, then it's hard for a physical therapist to write to an insurance company and say, hey, can you purchase this power chair that's very expensive, even though it's not really going to fit in their home. So those are things that your physical therapist should be helping you navigate, because thinking about a time that your child might not be walking anymore is really hard. And I like to try and take some of that burden off so that the day-to-day things, you just get to focus on your day-to-day and what is today. And I will do the job of keeping an eye out for, hey, I think we're going to be needing this in a couple of years, so can you start working on this in anticipation of this? And giving you it in smaller bites to manage, so you're not constantly thinking of it all at the same time. And then transportation, right? Power chairs are really heavy, so they can't just go into a regular vehicle and be lifted in and out of the car. So finding financial support to get wheelchair van is also really helpful. Unfortunately, insurances don't really care about that because they only care about you really using it in your home. So at least in Maine, I've been starting to really navigate, where can we get these financial supports for this? So common barriers to physical therapy things: time. There's just not enough time in the day to do anything, let alone add in a home exercise program that sometimes your kid doesn't want to do. So we try and work really hard to not overwhelm you with something, or to help figure out how can we work this part of the home exercise program into your everyday life that's already happening. I have a little 2-year-old girl, doesn't have Duchenne, but she has to use a stander 2 hours a day, every day. And she's agreeable to going into it. She enjoys being in it, but because she's 2, her mom has to stay with her the entire time and entertain her because she cries when she walks away. And so now mom's not getting anything done for 2 hours, and there's laundry and dinner and all the stuff. And it's stressful. And so we sat down and we had a discussion, and it turns out the little girl likes to help with laundry, and there's a tray on the standing frame, and I said, give her the laundry. And so now she takes the laundry, wheels her into the laundry room, takes the laundry out of the washer, sets it on the tray, and it turns into another exercise because the little girl's going to use her affected arm to push it into the dryer, and it's become this whole great program for them, and it takes up a nice 15 minutes of the standing time, and then they move on to the dishwasher, and she's able to like just barely reach the top shelf of the dishwasher and take all of her plastic things out and hand them to mom. So it's really become two things now. It's exercises, it's mom gets to get things done, and then during nap time, she actually gets to sit down for a minute, which is also a plus. And to me, that was just like second nature because it's what I've recommended 100 times now. But for that mom, she just was kind of pulling her hair out like I've used every sensory tool I have while she's in the stander and I'm all out of ideas. So that is something your physical therapist should be helping you think about and work into your day to help reduce some of the stress that comes with it. And I talked about tolerance. Some kids are just really tolerant, some kids are not so tolerant, and we're gonna maximize both situations. Social pressures are another really hard thing to work with, especially in school. And when kids start to get a little bit older into adolescence, they don't necessarily want to stand in a stander in front of their peers. And some kids don't mind at all. And a part of that is when we're starting early, all of their peers grow up with, this is so-and-so, and this is how they get through their day, and it's not foreign to them. So it's not something that ever becomes really a topic of conversation. So that is, again, part of like physical therapists in school, or the physical therapist in school working with the clinical therapist to say, hey, they should be doing like 2 hours of standing a day. That's really awful to make them do after school when they're exhausted and everyone's trying to get things done in the evening. Can they get some of this done at school? And the struggle then is, well, which class are they going to stand in their stander in? And I like to use PE because a stander is a perfect goalie for all sports, and then everyone wants them on their team because no one's ever going to score. And especially if you add some cardboard around it, then it's really good. So those are the things that I try and take to school and say, hey, let's do this because now everyone's asking for this person to be on their team. Or other games, maybe if we're still ambulatory, but there's a fall risk of kids running into them, we get an adaptive bike that they get to ride around the gymnasium and be the person that tags everyone out of jail. And then everyone's like yelling for them to hurry up and get over here. And they're working on cardio, they're working on active range of motion and all of the things, but yet everyone wants them on their team and they're included. And then that team gets like an advantage instead of trying to figure out like, oh, how do we include this person? And so that's mostly what your physical therapist should just be doing, is helping you navigate your day-to-day. They're thinking about the future years in advance into adulthood so that you can focus on today and enjoying the moment today. So, yeah, I think that's I think I pretty well covered everything. So I did mention like a few pieces of equipment. And this is just a very small snippet of things that I've used with some of my patients. Obviously, power chairs, which is really a bittersweet time because we're thinking about someone that's no longer walking. But I don't know, maybe for some of the people in the room that drive power chairs, I've found it's actually sort of exciting time too, because you get this really cool thing on wheels that makes you fast. And a lot of times when I get my patients in them, they just drive away and they're gone. And I'm like, okay, see ya. And you like can't keep up because their power chair is going really fast. And they love it. It's really cool to watch somebody get to be fast. And then as a therapist, it's really exciting to help pick out what the bright power chair is and what functions does it have, and then start learning how can we use all of these functions to do your own stretches and to access your home and do the things that maybe someone's doing for you right now, but you'll be able to do them on your own because you have this new mobility. So the one in the middle is called a gait trainer, and This wouldn't be something I would order through insurance because gait trainers are meant to be used for to progress gait, but they're a really great resource for PE classes when, you know, we're still walking, but we don't want to have a fall during PE, but we want to just send them out onto the court and say, go for it. They can a lot of times be faster because they're being supported, and it just lets their peers still play without worrying that they're going to fall down, and they don't have to have an adult sort of hovering around them all the time because it's annoying. And then just some examples of AFOs that we might wear at nighttime, and working with an orthotist that is understanding of kids and what they're needing is really helpful. And hopefully your physical therapist would have connections with an orthotist and be able to communicate with them closely. Upper extremity supports to continue being able to do some self-care items and or access work, leisure activities, video games, that sort of thing is really helpful. And then the center one is one type of standing frame that I've been having some good luck with, and then the other one is a different type of standing frame that maybe we would use for much younger kids. So the takeaways is start early, start all the things early, technically before we even feel like we need them, just to get them as part of being a routine, communicate with your providers, and just start to integrate the needs that we anticipate in the future into the day-to-day now, so we're prepared and we're not waiting on something and missing out on opportunities. So, and there's my pets, because anyone in this room who knows me is not a session without talking about Anna's, my crew. So, yeah, and this is my happiest place. So I want everyone to have the same. So, yeah. Well, thank you. And. Yeah, so well, if anyone has any questions or thoughts? Yes.
I have a question. So my son is 5, and a big part of our journey has been autism. So he has severe autism, and that obviously factors into the physical therapy and a lot of the devices, sensory stuff, and limited communication. Do you have any tips around stretching and the AFOs? Like,
yeah.
Yeah,
that is really interesting. So again, working with a pediatric physical therapist and OT at the same time would be really important there, because we have to regulate the sensory system before we can expect them to wear an AFO. So there may be interventions that we have to do leading up to putting an AFO on, or even getting fitted for AFOs is sometimes a really challenging thing. There's a whole world of different types of AFOs that we can try and wear. And sometimes it's a really slow process. So outside of a patient, he didn't have Duchenne, but he had severe autism, and he was terrified of anything sharp, scissors, really terrified, just anything. It's very scary. And so it took us about a year to be able to get into AFOs, but we started with just like wrapping an ACE bandage around the foot part way and then removing it and pairing it with something that he really enjoyed, which for him was his iPad. It was a really slow step-by-step process, but then eventually he was able to tolerate casting for AFOs, and now he wears his AFOs no problem. And once the AFOs are on and fitting, sometimes that compression and uniform pressure, it feels really good for kids with sensory problems, because shoes are weird. They have like all these weird pokey points that maybe we don't necessarily notice from day to day, but a lot of kids with sensory integration disorder notice the pokey spots on the shoes, and they don't want to put them on, or they're walking on tiptoes already, which we want to discourage, especially with Duchenne, because that tends to be the gait pattern that we run into. So if you have an OT that can help manage the sensory system first, and then working with a physical therapist to prep, like here's what the steps are going to be like to have this done, will be helpful. And then similarly with sometimes like the standing frames are, because they have like sort of this just coziness about them, some kids really kind of relax when they're in their standing frame, and it becomes this barrier to the rest of the world, which for some kids is a negative because it means their peers can't come up to them as well, but other kids are like, yes, stay away, please, give me my space. So we can try and use that to an advantage and start them out just so slowly. I mean, it might just be the standards in the room, and they get to go over to it and explore it however they want. And then, it's one foot touches it, the other foot touches it, and that's done. And it's really just working with them at their pace, and not forcing something and having them have a negative side effect or a negative association with it would be awful. So my goals when I write them, if I know that's a struggle, I'm gonna make them so tiny, because then we get to document success as we go. If I make this crazy goal of like, we'll stand in standard for 2 hours daily, well, that's not helpful to anyone. So it might be, we'll tolerate standard in the room as we're doing a preferred activity. And with the goal of maybe that will happen in like 3 months. And if it happens sooner, then awesome, we cross that one off and make it just a little more challenging. So I don't know if that's helpful. Yeah. Yeah, Dr.
I just wanted to add something to this. I love the occupational therapy, physical therapy, like co-model there. I've seen some families have success with like the behavioral analysis that they might be working with in their school or their, autism community resource, pairing up with the physical therapist to like pair the sort of slow introduction of the AFO to other behavioral techniques that they were already going to be working on anyways, to sort of accept new things. So that's another strategy that I've seen successful, is like, how do you, it's hard because you got to get those people in the room at the same time. But if you can, that can be really helpful.
Yeah. Yeah.
This is really helpful. But is there anything that, as we're working towards, getting a physical therapist who's on board with this and stuff, for him to avoid doing, like there's too much of a strain, or just let him do what he wants to do? Or,
Yeah. I think what I maybe didn't mention was having an active lifestyle overall and learning the cues of fatigue, so that when you start to see those cues, you can work with him to say, buddy, your body's looking a little tired. Let's have a snack. Let's take a break, or let's do this activity. It's okay to take a break when your body's tired. And outside of that, the kids tend to be fairly self-limiting. They generally understand their bodies and will stop an activity on their own if they don't feel safe. And so that's something else you can talk with them about, is, does your body feel safe right now? Do you feel like the people around you are going to knock you down? And just help them be aware of those things. But I mean, maybe the high impact activities might not be so great, but also they tend to maybe engage in that for a little bit, and then they just naturally will back down and take a break. But things that are good to do are swimming, and if you can get into a pool, that's such a free place to move that is also great for circulation and respiratory health. And bike riding, like anything that is just and gentle and easy on your body are really great to do. But if your family enjoys being outside and you want to go for hikes and all of those, and I'd say, yeah, go for it. And then just recognize those signs of fatigue and have a plan for, all right, he's fatigued, we're going to pop him in the backpack for a little while, or we're going to have a trike or something that he can sit on that we can push and help push, and then he's still feels like he's doing something. And yeah. So, I don't know if you agree, Dr. Reynolds, that sounds okay? Yeah.
One thing I would add would be the avoidance of eccentric exercise, descending stairs, self-propelling in a manual wheelchair, anything that causes a burning sensation typically has been known to be more destructive in Duchenne with muscle than any other type of more of the exercise that's not as troublesome.
Yeah. Any other thoughts, questions?
Oh, they can't hear me? Oh. We're going to get started, everyone, so if you don't mind taking your seats, that would be great. I guess you got like right there. Thank you so much. So our next speaker, we're going to have Julie Mulkern. So she's from the Ronald McDonald House. And there you go.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. I apologize. I'm really in and out today. I have to go to a Renaissance birthday party with my two sons that are 8 and 11. So I don't know if I should dress the part when I leave or not. I'm not even sure what you wear for that. But I really appreciate you having me, and I'm excited there are so many people here. And I'm not sure, for some of you, I may be preaching to the choir about Ronald McDonald House. Some of you maybe don't know exactly what we do. And even if you have heard of us, I found since taking this position that a lot of people think the Ronald McDonald House is a wonderful place, which it is, but aren't quite sure exactly what it is that we offer. So I'm glad to be here today to chat with you about Ronald McDonald House. I will say that I have been the CEO at Ronald McDonald House since April, so it's very fresh for me too. It's been a wonderful experience so far. I'm really blown away by how many families stay with us on a regular basis. Or I shouldn't say regular, every day. So that's probably the biggest thing to get used to, is that we have these two facilities that are open 365 days a year, 24/7. So I'll tell you just a brief background about Ronald McDonald House Charities. We are not the foundation of McDonald's. Many people think that. We are very much supported by McDonald's in terms of financially and in the community. But the Ronald McDonald House started actually in the 70s. A woman named Audrey Evans. She was the head of oncology at the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia, and she realized in her work that there were so many parents and siblings in hallways and in spaces in the hospital with nowhere to go, nowhere to get respite. And so she started the very first Ronald McDonald House in Philadelphia. And since then, there have been over 400 Ronald McDonald Houses created all over the world. They're in many countries, and here in Maine, we have 2 houses. The Bangor House was started in the early 80s, and not long after the Portland House came along. And so the Bangor House has 14 rooms for families to stay, and the Portland House has 34 rooms. And so we essentially take any family who has a child who is ill or injured, or with any long-term healthcare needs, that needs to stay close to the hospital for care. You may be staying in the hospital, and so in Portland, for example, I think most of you are Southern Maine based. In Portland, we're about a block from Maine Medical Center, and in Bangor, it's about a half a mile or less from Eastern Maine Medical Center. What people also, I think, don't realize is that we offer a place to stay for people if they're just traveling too far for even a day-long appointment and they're going to a specialty appointment. You can come and stay at our house. The house is a very warm, welcoming place. There's a free warm meal every day at dinner. We have guest chefs 365 days a year that come and cook dinner for our families. And it's just a place to sort of regroup and get away from sort of, if you're in the hospital, being in that hospital setting. I'm probably preaching to the choir here. Whoops. Did I skip a slide? No. Nope, I'm good. So I just explained the houses to you. I guess I wasn't on the slide yet. But we also have family rooms in both Maine Medical Center at Barbara Bush Children's Hospital and also at Northern Light, Eastern Maine Medical Center in Bangor. The family rooms specifically are very close to the PEDS unit and or NICU and PICU, depending on where people are. But those rooms are designed for people who maybe are the same people that are staying in our houses, but maybe mom's staying with us and dad's staying over with their child. And so the family room has laundry, a little kitchenette. There's a place to make meals. It's always fully stocked with snacks. You can have internet access and just sort of get off the unit, but not necessarily go to one of the houses. Not all Ronald McDonald houses and I'm saying this because I hear there is a family here from New York also. There are Ronald McDonald houses in New York, but not all chapters across the world have family rooms. It really depends on the setup of the hospital, the space in the hospital, et cetera. And for those that don't, they have a mobile cart that goes around for families that has some things on it that you might need, and those are rotated throughout the hospital. This is the one where I said I was probably preaching to the choir in this room, but it's sort of a why do we exist? We are all about providing care for families and access to care by allowing, here in Maine particularly, you know how huge the geography is. There are many people who are in Aroostook County, for example, and they're traveling 6 hours for specialty care in the southern part of the state because it may not exist where they live. And so we want to provide a place for people to stay. We know that health outcomes are better, clearly, when kids and parents are together, or kids and caregivers. And there's a huge cost saving for families by staying with us, and they're not paying for lodging, food, and other things. And yes, as you can see below, the savings for Maine families just last year was $1.9 million. There are 16,000 plus unique visits to Barbara Bush and Northern Light each year, and we've had 600 families in the past year stay with us, and they come from 7 states and 4 countries. And that this is the case in any Ronald McDonald chapter you are in the world. You don't have to be a resident of the state. You don't need to be even remotely close by. If you need care and a place to stay that's close to your child, then you can stay at a Ronald McDonald house. In Maine, there were 6,300 nights of comfort, and as I mentioned, we have 36 guest rooms in Portland and 14 in Bangor. Eligibility-wise, we take all families who need a place to stay. Children do need to be 18 years or under, and the referral process is usually through the hospital. Typically, a child life specialist or a social worker on the unit will refer families to the Ronald McDonald House if they need a place to stay. But we also work with all the specialty providers throughout the state, so they know that if people are going to clinics, day treatment, day appointments, they can also stay with us. The only individuals that cannot stay in our house for safety reasons of other guests are people who are on the National Sex Offender Registry, which is a clear reason not to, or have an open CPS case. Those are the only non-eligible patients or families. And that was quick, but any questions?
Okay, I've never even been told by a caseworker in Boston about the Ronald, and I think they have one in Boston.
They do, and I'm sorry to hear that. I'll let them know. Yeah.
He's actually having surgery on Wednesday. I do have a sister lives nearby, so I mean, it leaves a bed open for someone that needs it, but it's not as close as the house is probably gonna be to him. How do you, and how old is it any?
18 and under.
Okay, so that's.
But also, and if I wasn't clear, the family, the children are 18 years and under, but any siblings, grandparents, whoever those close caregivers are that need to be with your family at that time can stay in our house. And the houses, depending on where they are, have multiple different layouts. In Boston, actually, they're working on building a brand new house. I'm so glad that I'm not the CEO in Boston. They're looking for a place, to have a much larger space. But right now, the house in Boston is actually apartments. They're wonderful and they're really nice, but they need a much bigger space. And it's interesting that you've never heard of it. So, sometimes the referral not been referred. Yeah, that's interesting. Mm-hmm. And I'll let Laura know. She's the CEO there. And where the New England chapters work very closely together. So it's good to know. Sometimes here we also, in Maine, people that I meet say, I've never, ever been offered that opportunity. And that's the last thing we want to hear. So we're working hard to do outreach so that people know that we're a resource, we're completely free, and we want to be there for people.
Is it pretty full, like, all the time?
It's a great question. We're actually busier in the summer. It kind of varies, but we're busier in the summer, and we think it's mostly a product of tourism. So a lot of people coming in, and it's injuries or accidents, in the summertime, so we're busier. But the Portland house, since I've arrived in April, has been almost full. most of the time. Bangor ebbs and flows. It depends on what, and that's primarily because Bangor has excellent services, and they have actually a large NICU and PICU in Bangor. But again, a lot of them end up getting flown down to Maine Med for services. So, but right now, as we speak, the Portland House, out of 34 rooms, we have 22 families right now, which is low for us. And in Bangor, there are 8.
Are certain rooms reserved for like patients who are inpatient versus those who say are traveling from northern Maine to come down for a clinic visit or multiple clinic visits in a day, and might otherwise be staying at like a local hotel or whatever? Like, how do you vary outpatient versus inpatient?
That's a great question. A lot of the people that are with us that are inpatient are with us for a very long time. So it really depends on the referrals of the day and what spaces are available. But we're really great about accommodating families that have multiple children, and so their space is much bigger. Or in Bangor, for example, we have an apartment space that a family uses quite often. They live in Wallagrass, which I just learned where that was. I don't know if any of you know, but it is very, very far out, sort of between Washington County and Aroostook County. And so their travel just for their appointments is long, and so they stay in that space. But we try to be very accommodating depending on size and how long you're gonna be there. But the rooms are all very comfortable, private bathrooms, and the Portland House, because it's bigger, has sort of 3 different sections, and so certain sections have their own kitchenettes, and we have a large dining room where the dinner is served as people want it, but there are a lot of resources available.
In the case that you're at full capacity, what happens to a family? Would you grab them somewhere else, or just how does that work?
It's a great question. We're very tied in with the social workers at the hospitals, and so if we're full, we do everything we can in working with them to find an alternative for them. And we also, because there's, we could say to a family, we don't have any space right now, but we know someone's leaving in 2 days and you can have the room. So we try to work really hard to do that. We found that where our capacity is good, we're always gonna have more demand, we know that. But we try very hard. If we have to turn someone away, so to speak, we find an alternative for them. And the hospitals are pretty good about finding either a reduced cost place until they can get in with us. But last year, this is just a fun stat, last year, the family that stayed with us the longest was 250 days. So we had a family for 250 days. Their child, it was a NICU baby who was actually born at 21 weeks. So they lived with us for almost a year. Yes, in most cases. So but if someone calls directly and says, I'd like to stay, we just say, who is your provider, or who is your specialty care person, or who is it that you're working with, and they'll just send the referral over, only because just from a policy standpoint, it's just the paperwork. But anyone can call. Oh. Me too. So how long ago were you in the Portland House? Just curious. So if you came for a little visit now, you would be shocked by how big it is. Yeah. So I'm glad. I hope you had a really great experience there. Good.
Are there certain times that local healthcare providers can come and visit? Do you have like
Yes.
set days or times?
I love that idea. No, we don't have set times and days, but because we're open 24/7, we welcome anyone. The door is truly open. Anyone can come. We love to give tours. We're trying to get more medical students actually in, so they realize that it's such a huge, important part of what they're doing too. But we have people in touring all the time. No more questions? Thank you so much. And please don't hesitate. My email is in the slides. Do they have the slides?
We can send it to them if they want
If you need anything or want to reach out, please feel free to email, visit our website. And I can't stress enough, we are everywhere in the world. So wherever you happen to find yourself and you need us as a resource, reach out wherever you are locally. Okay. Thank you so much.
Awesome. Okay, so now I'm going to bring up the Sister's Wish. So could Amy and Beth please come up? Do you need the slides at all, or are you just going to use the website? What do you prefer?
We can just do, maybe start with a slide and then I can just look to the website and just show me how to do that.
So you're just going to hit the next button to go to the next slide. And then when you want to get out, just hit the escape button. Sure. And then just go to Chrome, and I'll pop right up.
Okay.
Okay.
We're both very loud.
Yeah. Not really even
Probably
needed, but
it's not
thank
going to be
you.
necessary.
Okay, I hear you.
Oh, they want us. They really do.
You can talk in there and I'll talk in these.
Oh, well, I like to walk around.
Can you tell we're sisters?
Hi, everybody. My name is Beth Turner-Letourneau, and I am one of the co-founders of the Sisters Wish. That was a no mic, everybody. Can you imagine? So my name is Beth Turgeon-Letourneau. I'm one of the co-founders of the Sisters Wish. You probably noticed no difference, me with a mic versus not with a mic. We're excited to be here today to talk about our labor of love, which is the Sisters Wish. This is a nonprofit my sister and I started about 17 years ago. I just want to get a feel for kind of who is in the room. I know obviously many of the families are affected by Duchenne disease. How many are also like providers or work in a local hospital? Okay, and then families. Okay, awesome, thank you. I just wanted to get a sense of who was in the room. They always pick the least entertaining people that present right before lunch, so feel free to turn around as the food gets brought in. This is a side hustle. My regular gig is I'm a school counseling administrator in southern Maine, so I'm used to kind of entertaining high school and elementary kids, so we'll see what I can do today. The focus of our talk today is really about explaining how you turn your grief into gifts. So my sister and I started the Sisters Wish about 17 years ago. We have a younger brother named Craig. We were ABC. Everybody go, ah. Isn't that so cute? Amy, Beth, and Craig. Our brother Craig had cancer from the age of 4 to 24. So 20 years of cancer. He relapsed about 14 times over those 20 years and passed away about 17 years ago. During that time, our brother was lucky enough to get a Make-A-Wish. Some of you have had Make-A-Wish, I'm assuming, involved in your life. But we also know that he passed away at the age of 24, that at 24, you're not really an adult. Can I get an agreement in the audience? Who here was really adulting at 24? Okay, yeah. Anyone under 24 is like, yeah, I am. You're like, no, you're not. And so when our brother died, before our brother passed, we just sort of started to notice, like, wow, like he's 18, all these awesome services and things that are available are no longer available because, even like was just spoken about earlier, Ronald McDonald, once you hit 18, you're an adult. And so what we did is started a nonprofit that grants wishes to young adults in Maine, New Hampshire, and Massachusetts that are for young adults that are between the ages of 18 and 30. And the requirement is residency in Maine, New Hampshire, and Mass. And I'll be honest, the biggest part of that is where our brother was treated, and then also life, right? Married, work full-time, have 2 kids. Married, works part-time. But she has 5 kids. 5 kids, so I'm not bitter, just be better. You're not, well, the food's coming in now, though. Okay. So that's a little bit how we got started. Our brother passed away, and we wanted to do something to honor his memory. He was an incredible young man, had his leg amputated at one point, was trying out for the U.S. Paralympic junior ski team, and just really had an incredible zest for life. And we knew that when he passed, we, the sisters, get it, wink, wink, play on words, the Sisters Wish, wanted to do something to honor his memory and still have the opportunity to talk about him. And so at this point, we're actually closing in on over 80 wishes, and you actually have a young man in the audience that's received a wish from the Sisters Wish.
he and his brother also had received, who's no longer with us, had also received a wish. I'm going to turn this over to my sister, who you'll find not as entertaining.
Oh my God. This is why I should have started. Let me just go there. Oh, it doesn't matter.
You got to be on the thing, though.
It's right here. So I'm the older sister, despite this one coming in hot. So as my sister said, we've granted 80. We just actually granted our 80th wish. We started a long time ago, and just this year, because we're not trying to be a huge nonprofit, because again, we're both super busy. We do have a smaller board. So we typically do between, I think the 1 year we did 11 wishes, but we tend to do about 6 a year. Right now this year, our wishes vary. We've done a Disney trip. We actually did a baby room for a young girl, sent someone to New York City, and then a fishing boat. And, one of my favorite wishes, we had a young man with cystic fibrosis who his wish was to drive across country, and we helped him. And he went alone, and he had all of his vests and his feeding pump and everything, and he had it all organized with our help, and he did it, and it was just, he sent us pictures along the way, and it was just fantastic. So, granting 80 wishes, we've had just so many just different wishes that are just awesome and unique to every wish recipient that we have. We've, just fun fact, we're really lucky about our donors, and money just sort of comes in for us. We're very lucky with that. We've granted over $250,000 in wishes total with those 80 wishes. So it's just amazing that we're really lucky to be able to do this.
Stick to the script. That's here. I'm going to bring the website up so they
Yeah.
can see the website. You want to get the mic? Yeah. You want to go over there, and then I'll just show some of them. Can you follow me to work? Because our tech never works at where I work. It's amazing.
Actually, let's do this.
Yeah.
Just get out of the PowerPoint for a second.
So if you know anyone, so again, as my
You're
sister
talking to
said, that usually I'm not used to having to use a mic. That is between 18 and 30 years old, and we typically like the wish recipient to apply for themselves, but we have had family members ask to do an application for them as a surprise. You just quickly, go to our wish. Sorry, no problem. You can go to our website and just hit the button and just apply for a wish.
That's the button.
That's the button. And it's very simple, as you can see. I mean, it's not complicated questions. How would you describe yourself, your best day, some wish ideas that you've had, have you ever received a wish before? And a lot of the young adults have received a wish before. That isn't that's not something that we would ever really not give a wish for. And we need to upgrade our update with this year's wishes. Although we did just get Grace. Grace just came back from Disney. We had worked with her for a bit. We had to just delay hers a little bit, but she just came back this week actually from Disney with her family and drove there. And Beth's just kind of sort of going around with some of the other wishes. So the majority of wishes that we grant are from Maine. We have a handful from New Hampshire, probably I think maybe 15 from New Hampshire, also a handful from Massachusetts. We have board members from all 3 of the states. And there it is. Does anyone have any questions for us?
That was my part.
Yeah.
Is there a max grant that an individual can get?
Good question. Do you want me to take that?
Yeah.
Oh. Okay, thank you for that, sister. So we like to not disclose that, if that makes sense, because what we have found on occasion is that if we say our max is $6,000, then some families want to get to $5,999.99. But if your wish and what you want for your wish is $4,000, then that's the max of your wish. Does that make sense? So we have a cap amount, but the goal is to really complete the wish that you want. Yes?
How do people learn about you?
So our website, Facebook, Instagram, we connect with a lot of local social workers. Obviously, social work people are hired, leave their positions, we have to reconnect, but we tend to get certain streams of social workers and hospitals, agencies that know about us and refer to us. But we're always interested in getting our more information out. I think my sister was going to pass out some koozies and magnets, that kind of stuff, just for information about it. We're always happy to look at wish requests. It's funny, we'll sometimes have no requests for like a certain number of months, and then we'll get like 4 in a row. It just kind of ebbs and flows. Mm-hmm. Yes?
The application being filled out and entered, how long does it take to get awarded or get acknowledged?
I mean, we can move very quick from like getting the application, and if it was sort of an emergent situation that the person was going to pass and really wanted this wish immediately, we could get started, 2 days later. Yeah, it really just depends on, and we have a board of directors, it's my sister and myself, and then some other people have come alongside us, so depending on the area of the state, but we can move very quickly if needed, if that makes sense.
Did it start in Maine and then you grew to the other 2 states? Like, how did you pick which states was in the criteria?
A lot of it was related to sort of where we live and also where our brother was treated. So he was treated at Maine Med and then also at Boston Children's. And our father, the other part of our story that we didn't share is that both of our parents passed when we were quite young. So our mother died on my sister's 16th birthday, and then our father died on her 30th birthday, and our brother died 2 days later. And so we had a real rough go of it. And so through that tragedy, we really wanted to be able to bring light into other people's life. And so for us, it really has been a joy to be able to give wishes to people. You feel like Oprah, which is like my life goal. If anybody knows her, that's my wish, people. Right here. But it feels that way, right? And I also can understand for people receiving a wish, it's awkward, right? This person you don't know from Sanford, Maine is like, what do you want? And you're like, I don't even know you, lady. And we're like, no, like, we're here for it. So totally get that it can be uncomfortable for families receiving a wish, but the goal is that it's something that they're interested in. I can think of the wish that we had done for your family, for your older son. He wanted to meet Glenn Beck, and I remember I had to Google it. I thought Glenn Beck was a football player. True story. And so he ended up having, I believe, to be what was an incredible wish, to be able to spend the day with Glenn Beck. And so our wishes have been as unique as the people that request them, and we really enjoy doing wishes that are unique and special to people.
And I'll just add, I'm a nurse I'm a pediatric nurse in a Boston hospital. So it also was sort of like, not only was our brother treated in Massachusetts, but also just having connections there as well.
Is this once a lifetime wish, or how, is it just one and done, or once a year? How does that work? I can't remember what you said.
Oh, you can't get one time, yeah. But we're saying, like, if someone got a Make-A-Wish, which is very common with a lot of our wish recipients, they can still get a sister's wish. It doesn't mean if you had to make a wish when you were 10, you can't get a wish when you were 25.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Good looks and sparkling personality, mostly.
She used to do stand-up. I don't know if any of you have picked up on this, just as a side note.
As you can tell, my career was quite short.
Yes.
But I am a school counseling director, which I feel like I use stand-up a lot in.
Yeah.
So, Sister's Wish actually started initially after our brothers passed with kind of cringe events like Kegs for Cancer. And so as we started to get a little bit more known at a 501c3, we learned a lot about the word liability. And so we then stopped hosting those kind of events. And so we do one big annual fundraiser a year, but we have been fortunate in that many of our wish recipients, families or friends, have continued to support us. We have one particular wish, a young man whose wish was to go to Nike Town. Who knew that was a thing? How many here would ever want to go to Nike Town? I guess you have to really love Nike sneakers. That wish recipient has since passed away, but his parents hold an annual basketball tournament, and they donate about $10,000 to $15,000 to us every year based on that. So we're fortunate in that way.
And a lot of our brother's friends have continued in his class. They just did a wish for us and sponsored a wish. So
yeah. That's true. Yeah, we might have a group that would ask, like, can we donate a wish, and have a wish in this person's name, and so we'll do something like that as well. Okay, thank you so much. Looks like lunch is ready. Am I allowed to say that?
You kind of jumped on there.
Okay.
Oh, thank you so much. Thanks for having us. Oh, sorry, my notes.
Awesome.
Thank you.
I didn't want them to be the last one before lunch. I'll take that honor. But quick summary, I can't help but think about something Dr. Reynolds emphasized a lot, which was community. This community, this Duchenne community, is incredibly supportive, incredibly knowledgeable, and willing to go the extra mile to lend a hand. I think this is where, as you heard, the Ronald McDonald House and what Julie was talking about, Amy Beth, with what their great work they're up to, it's where community meets awareness. Oftentimes, you weren't aware that there were these other resources out there. And through working and networking and being at events such as this, it just, I'm like, oh my gosh, I never even thought about that as an option. So if you have questions, trying to figure out and trying to navigate, the best thing you can do is just ask any of us, ask any of the people in this room that have been navigating it for a little bit of time. They're going to give you a lot of help. And just lastly, Jett Foundation's most recent hire was a mom with a son that has Duchenne. She lives down in North Carolina, and she's come on as our social worker. So if you just have questions about trying to navigate the local community levels, we're there to help you. Just reach out to us. Her name is Jessica Campbell, and we're happy to make some connections and help you navigate it as best we can. So with that, I say thank you so much for coming in. What an amazing foundation you guys have created in memory. I love it, and enjoy. Manja.
All right. Hi, everybody. I am Alexa Tinsley. I am the Director of Programs for Jett Foundation. I am sorry I am very late, but I am so excited to meet you guys and see you guys, because this is what is my favorite part about my job. So to be able to kind of kick that one off, I do want to give the opportunity for anybody to come up and share their story or share their experience. I'm going to leave it at that. If you do want to share your experience, raise your hand. If you don't, absolutely okay. All right, I'm going to go ahead and show a video. It's from our Gainesville workshop back in 2023. Two of our ambassadors at the time shared their experience, and if you do feel like you want to share yours after that, please feel free, but again, no pressure. And Julie, I don't know where this is, so you're going to have to help me out here.
Y'all, I am Jessica Campbell, and I'm from Hendersonville, North Carolina, just outside of Asheville. I have two children because often, I say two because I often leave out the youngest one. Javon is our oldest. He's 16. He was diagnosed with Duchenne at the age of 8. After many years of us asking for answers, why is he not running as fast as the other kids? Why is he not jumping? Why can he not keep up? Blah, blah, blah. It was at the age of 8 following a late night Google search in which we stumbled across the Gower sign, which led to the letter to the doctor, which led to the referral to the neurologist. I would say I was angry for a good 2 years. I hated the world and everybody in it for not helping us, for not giving any support. We were handed a diagnosis, actually not even us. His father received a phone call, said, hate to tell you this, here's the diagnosis, steroid or nothing. There was no follow-up call. There was no, here's resources. All we knew was Google. And y'all know Google, right? It's the worst of the worst. You'll have a headache Monday and you'll lose your big toe by Friday. So, yeah. So after moving through some of those emotions, anticipatory grief, what the heck even is this DMD, finally got out of my own way, utilized social media for the positives, and found DMD Moms, where I've crossed paths with several of you, found the Jett Foundation, found Porch Night. And the first Porch Night, I stayed off screen. It was in like the pandemic world kind of just started, and I guess that's kind of what allowed me to slow down and explore this journey. Got on Porch Night, turned my camera off, muted, and I remember thinking, how in the world do these women do this? How do they retain all this information and keep moving forward in life? How do they even like each other? Like, where do they find humor? How do you get back to the old you? Who's the new you? Who am I as a mother if I'm still feeling this way and here they are living their best lives? So I jumped on the next one, and then the next one, and then I started to find my voice, and then I started to hear tips and tricks, and hey, ask your doctor this, and maybe this. And now I just go into the doctor and say, hey, listen, I'm really not trying to step on your toes. I'm trying to plan for the future. You're trying to get through today. I need A, B, C, and D. We ended up applying for the Jett Giving Fund. We were accepted. We had our first fundraiser, and COVID shut the world down. Like, shut it down. Javon had said, well, what's it matter? We can't go anywhere anyway. And I was like, well, I'd like to leave the house sometime to do something. Got this massive wheelchair. We were using ramps to like put it in the back of the van while transferring him. He's a growing boy. We all know, it's not safe. Eventually, we did make it through. We were able to persevere. We had support system, community that were donating items. We were doing online raffles. If you've ever gone live on Facebook, the first time is terrifying. After the first time, you just give up. You really don't care what they see in your background. You say whatever's on your mind. You get what you need. So we made it. We got the van in July, and Javon was accepted into a clinical trial by that October. So regardless of how I feel about Duchenne, there's still positives in the world, and it does all fall into place. So here we are now, all these years later. Javon participates in Camp Promise virtually. Hopefully we'll go in person this year. I continue to assist with Porch Night. I continue to grow as a human being. My family continues to become better humans. My 11-year-old, that's Janessa, the one I can't forget, she's going on becoming my mother. It's paved the way for her. She's transitioned to wanting to be a nurse, and we homeschool, so she's able to start that journey now and educate herself now. So yeah, that's a little piece of us and who we are. And I'm an open book, so please feel free to ask me anything.
Jess, can you give a little bit of like your clinical trial journey, not necessarily specifics, but just kind of the thought process? Yeah, the thought process, choosing.
If y'all want me to keep it real, remember when I told you I was angry for a good 2 years? Once I got past that, people were like, clinical trials, are there clinical trials? I don't care if there is a clinical trial. My child will not be your lab rat. That's how I viewed it. Because the way I see it, and maybe it was my healthcare side and career coming out of me, was the financial piece. Don't come at me with, we're doing this and we're doing this if it's not. That's great for everybody else. but how do you care about my child and my family as individuals? Where do we fit into your world? Do you go home at night and lay your head on your pillow and think about us or what you're doing the next day? Eventually, I did get out of my own way and said, well, we got to do something. It's either something or nothing. So we did, we found the clinical trial that Javon is currently in. We found that his neurologist was not sharing all the options with us as far as clinical trials go, only those in which they were taking place at their site, at their location. So he was in a clinical trial for a full year before his neurologist knew he was in one, because we found it. We traveled 3 hours one way and 3 hours back. I will say that was rough financially, because there was a lot of, okay, well, he did too well here with the PFT. Can you come back in 2 days? Oh, wait. Oh, we got one more chance at this. So over this like 2-week period, you're rearranging your whole life. You're missing work. Am I gonna have my job next week? Trying to do what I have to do. Because he was too well to qualify for this trial. The only way Javon got in was because he had a birthday in that 2-week period. So it changed the numbers just enough for him to get in. So while we're thankful, it's who has that to give up front? What if we didn't qualify and we've spent all this money on hotels and we've spent this travel? Who helps us at that point? How do we make it easier for families? You can find me tonight at Porch Night.
Hello, thank you. I'll give you a little bit about my background, and I live in Hershey, Pennsylvania, a little town outside of Hershey called Lebanon. I have 3 sons, 23, 21, and 16, and Levi, my 16-year-old, is in 10th grade, and he's an amazing, very stable, a little quirky Duchenne young man. He was diagnosed at 2, very similar to other families in the audience. Wasn't meeting his milestones. And my brother, who was a medical student in Philadelphia at the time, came home from a break and he said, you know what, Levi's not running, he's not jumping. And he was a medical student, but he knew this, and he said, you need to go to the doctor and figure some things out. So he didn't know muscular dystrophy, he just knew that his nephew wasn't doing the things that a 2-year-old should be doing. And literally on Christmas Eve, we got the results of a CPK that it was, 28,000, very similar to your stories, right? And that's not good. So, we went into, like Jessica, a deep, deep, dark place. And I would just think about his brothers that were 6 and 4 at the time. Like, what is their life going to be like? But I will tell you, we have an amazing life. My older boys are amazing human beings. My 23-year-old cares for his brother during the day, and he cares for a Lebanon Valley College student at night. So they would have been amazing human beings anyway, but they're extraordinary. So, our life has evolved. It's been fantastic, but it was with the support of other Duchenne families. When we were in that very, very dark place, one day he's a perfect little person, and the next day you're telling me that it's going to be a very different life. Somehow I found a Duchenne mom in Arizona, and she was happy on the phone. And I'm like, why are you so happy? Because I thought I'll never be happy again. And she literally, in about a 10-minute conversation, changed the chemistry of my brain. She's like, he's gonna be fine. It's not gonna be the life that you thought, but he's going to be okay. And he is. Yeah, he's in a power chair, but let me tell you, he's hysterical. He keeps us grounded, he keeps us on our toes. And during this journey, we have found many organizations that have really supported us. You know, we support them all. I love them. We go to conferences with PPMD, but the one that struck me the most is the Jett Foundation, because they give back to us when we need it, right? Yes, we need research. We get that. And there are organizations that are doing that. But who's going to help me get the $80,000 van? The average person just can't. Yeah, I can have a $1,300 car payment for the next 10 years. Who can do that, right? So Jett Foundation gives back to us. And we were one of the recipients of the Jett Giving Fund in a van. We raised, I think, $20,000, and they gave us the other $20,000. So we were able to buy a very reliable, low mileage van that we still have. And we're so grateful because Levi is in a power chair now. He's 16 and stopped walking at 11. So, you know, it's just been a blessing, a true blessing. And we're happy to host the porch night tonight. Some moms are going to be joining us. It's an amazing support group that I was one of the co-founders of. And we really just do try to help families and support. We're not nurses, we're not doctors, we don't give out any clinical information. We always tell them, talk to your doctors, but this is our experience. And many times our experience, you know, we're in the trenches with you. We're helping our children in their ceiling lift. We're helping with, okay, what do you do when they're constipated? What do you do about kidney stones? What do you do about FES, which is fatty embolism syndrome? You know, how do you transition from ambulatory to non-ambulatory? These are a lot of things that we have some experience in. But we also, you know, I go to a Danielle Shoup, whose son's 24. I ask her questions because my son is 16. We're always learning and always evolving. So that's what Porch Night has become. So, you know, if you're going to be with us this evening, we're happy to have you. It's going to be an amazing space to talk about whatever's on your heart. And I'm just honored to be a parent ambassador. Just love the Jett Foundation. Thanks for your time.
Person, so I'm going to try to see if you can hear me. You know those infomercials where they always say, but wait, there's more? Well, that's pretty much how our journey has been. So I live in a small town in South Louisiana, like we're in the middle of nowhere. No one even knows where we are on the map, and no one can say the name of our town. But I have 3 children. My oldest is, he's about to be 21. My son Austin would be 19. And I have a daughter who is 15. So our journey began probably around 12 years ago. We had a 7-year-old, a 5.5-year-old, and a 2-year-old. My boys were only 18 months apart. And I started noticing that my middle son was not doing things, like we had just went through this. He was not doing things like his brother had done. I had my suspicions early on, but our pediatrician would say, well, some kids just develop later than others. And being that he had a sibling that was close to his age, they would kind of like work together. So like his sibling would do stuff for him so where he didn't have to do it. And then my daughter came along and I'm like, okay, things are really not right. So he started school and he was having trouble going up and down the steps and climbing up the stairs to the school bus. So I took him to the pediatrician and I said, I think there's really something wrong and I need you to just check on it. So she was on the 2nd story, so she had us go up and down the stairs. He went up 2 stairs and she told me to pick him up. So right then and there, I'm like, okay, there's really something going on. So we went back to her office and she said, I think this is what he has, but don't go home and Google it. Well, that was the first thing I did. I went home and I Googled it. So I'm like, I have got to know what's going on. And she checked his CK levels, and they came out to 29,800. So at that point in time, we pretty much knew what it was. She sent us to a neurologist. We did the genetic testing. It took about 6 months to come back, and it showed that he did have Duchenne muscular dystrophy. We have no family history. We never heard of this word before. They had me checked. I'm the only girl in my family, I only have brothers, and I found out then and there that I was a carrier. They said I was going to be fine, carriers didn't have symptoms, everything was going to be okay on my end. But when I asked, what can we do for my son, they said there's nothing. You can take him home and love him, and there's nothing. And I, like Perlita and Jessica, I was like very upset. Our world just crashed underneath us. And I'm like, how can they say that? He's 5.5 years old. How can you tell a parent, take your child home and love him? Obviously, we're gonna love him. That's what we do, we're parents. But that's not all we're gonna do. So then Google became my friend. And I spent many nights researching and trying to find doctors and hospitals and cures. And then I found out none of those things existed. We didn't have the specialists that were familiar with Duchenne. We didn't have treatment options, and there was no cure. So then Google, again, led me to find organizations like Jett Foundation and PPMD and Centers of Excellency for Duchenne. So we started traveling to Cincinnati Children's Hospital, and we did that for many, many years. And then COVID hit. So we had to miss an appointment. So instead of going every 6 months, it was like, I think a year or maybe 15 or 16 months before we were able to go back. And I knew things were starting to decline. I fully went to this appointment expecting that Austin would need daytime ventilation. I wish that would have been the case. We were given options to where Austin had reached the end of his journey, and he was gonna have to go home on hospice, or he was gonna have to get a trach. So he was very brave, I'm sorry, and we let him take control, and he made his own decisions. And he passed away in 2021. God, he was such a beautiful boy. And you think that would be the end of our journey, right? Because he paid the ultimate sacrifice. Our family paid the ultimate sacrifice. But that was not it. Because during those times, we found out my daughter, when she was 5 years old, started having the same symptoms. I'm like, there is no way. They told me this cannot happen. She wouldn't be having problems. Well, sure enough, she was. So I took her to the pediatrician again. By this time, she's probably like, oh my God, this lady is crazy. Can you just leave us alone? We checked her CK levels, and they were elevated. So then we had the genetic testing done. And she did have Duchenne muscular dystrophy. So over the years, we had to manage her care along with her brothers. And it's been a wild ride. So then now you're dealing with 2 kids with Duchenne muscular dystrophy, but one of them is a girl, and the doctors don't think that girls can have this. So it added a lot of difficult aspects to our lives. But anyway, she had her first cardiac MRI at the age of 13, and she already had fibrosis. And in December of this past year, at the age of 15, she had to have a cardiac surgery, and now she has an implanted loop recorder. So our journey has shifted over the years from trying to save her brother and help other boys with Duchenne to now it's about girls with Duchenne. Like, they can be having symptoms, they don't have the support. Doctors are still thinking that, okay, they don't have these problems, it's all in their head, or it's just stress, or they're trying to seek attention. So over the years, we're starting to try to bring awareness, because there are so many of us out there that could be undiagnosed or suffering in silence because the world doesn't know that they exist. So then our advocacy has shifted towards those issues. So that's where we are at this point in time. But I'm thankful to be a Jett ambassador and to have an organization that believes in us and is willing to be out there in the trenches with the families, offering support wherever it's needed. Thank you.
So there's a lot of dated information there. Levi is 18, and Javon is going on 18, and now Aubrey, who is Trina's daughter, she just graduated high school, is going to college, so everything's, chucking along. Jessica's now our social worker. Trina is a resource specialist for Jett Foundation as well, in the female space. So They are definitely huge advocates for our community. So with that, I will again offer, if anybody does want to share their journey or share anything with the room, now is the time. Come on up.
Hello, can you hear me okay? Okay, my name is Barry, and I originally from Maine. It's kind of the black sheep of my family, so at 19, I was like, grew up in a farming community. I was like, I need to leave Maine. This is just not working for me. So through my travels, living in the Midwest, Missouri, and then Texas, and then ended up in New Mexico, which is where I met my son's mom. So just a little bit about him. He's the important one here. Jared was diagnosed with Duchenne's. He was 7 years old. It's something I probably had, some of the things been different in our life. I probably would have been aware or been made aware of his situation earlier. It was actually his phys ed teacher just called me one day and said, you know what, I need to talk to you. And I went down and she goes, you know, he's just not doing the things that other kids are doing. And I just thought, you know, kids are different. He had delayed speech when he was 3, so I was just like, you know, it's just things are delayed. He's just a little bit different. Well, that wasn't the case. So that's when we went and we met, as you saw before, the new Maine facility, Dr. Rio. We were one of his early patients, and we've been with Dr. Reynolds since, what, 2012 or something like that? So it's been an incredible journey. There's 3 things I try to do for my son each day. And the first thing is to give him a good day. Doesn't have to be a great day, amazing day, but I refuse to have bad days. It's just not going to happen in my household. And people say, well, it's not that easy. Well, you're right, it's not that easy. But our backstory is we have kind of somewhat of a, I call it an emotional callous to some things, because when he was 2 years old, his mom was going through breast cancer. She was diagnosed with breast cancer when he was 7. So he never knew his mom healthy. So at that time when he was 2, she was going through reconstructive surgery, breast cancer, radiation, chemo, and I also had cancer at the same time. And I had surgery. I'm a 17-year survivor, cancer survivor. So this is even before he was diagnosed. So I feel that all of the emotional things, trauma that we went through prior to his diagnosis is something that has given us an inner strength and something that we can reflect on each and every day. And we don't have bad days. We just do not have bad days. The second thing I try to do is put him in a position to have success. Okay, what does that mean? Well, you have a child. Maybe you help him write a speech for the next time he's got to do a presentation. Maybe you set something around the house that you know it's going to be easier for him to reach because of his situation. You may put something in the refrigerator in a certain place so he can reach it. There's different things that you can do for your child. You have to kind of see life through his eyes, and after a while you will. So I do everything I can to try to give him success. Another one is I'm a high school soccer coach. My son is probably the only kid in America in a wheelchair that scored a countable goal in a high school varsity soccer game. Every year it happened. It's just, you know. I talked with athletic directors and coaches from other schools, and One community had a kid with Down syndrome. So my son scored a goal. They had a student athlete score a goal. And local sports writers here in Maine said these stories over these years are some of the greatest stories that they've ever seen or heard of. It's just incredible sportsmanship to do that. And the other thing I try to do is I try to do everything possible to get him to the next day. Well, so what does that mean? Well, my son had seizures for a period of time, for about 18 months. So not only am I dealing with what he normally has for limitations and problems, now I'm dealing with seizures. So the first time this happened, I'm laying in bed, maybe 6 o'clock, 6 or 7 o'clock in the morning, and I hear something downstairs. It's not a normal sound. So I rush out of bed, and my son's head had gotten off the pillow, so his head was all the way back, and he was not breathing. His mouth was full of fluid. He was unresponsive, and I'm just a dad. So what do? I kept screaming, today's not your day. I'm not going to lose you. So I set him up. I got his mouth open. I pulled his tongue out. I cleared the fluid out of his throat. And I got air into him. Just enough air for him to have a faint breath. And at the time, he was on a CPAP machine. So I don't even know why I thought of this, but my pediatrician, doctor of mine, said he never would have thought to do it. But I put his CPAP machine on him. He started breathing again. It was absolutely amazing. He was still with me. So a few months later, we are getting ready to go to our last scrimmage soccer game before the season. And I got upstairs to shower. He's in his wheelchair getting all ready to go. And I come out of the shower, get dressed, and go downstairs. And once again, he's had a seizure. And he's in his wheelchair that doesn't have a neck brace. And once again, his head is back. And he's gray. And he's cold. And he's not breathing. I'm just not a doctor. I don't know anything medical. But I want my son to be with me every day. So once again, by the grace of God and what little I know, I was able to get him breathing again. And he's still here with me. Fortunately enough, with Dr. Reynolds and his staff, we've got the seizures under control. It's been, I think, maybe 2 years now since we've had that issue. All our stories are different. All of them are just brutal stories. People just don't know when you're sitting here at a table or a sporting event or in your church or wherever. You just don't know what's going on at the table next to you. So we try to keep our life as normal as possible. I had a good friend's brother when I was growing up that he was always put into the corner. He was never included. And when he got his diagnosis, I was determined that he'll never be in the corner, and he will be a part of, in life, whatever he wants to be part of. So we are. We go where we want to go. We do what we want to do. And we enjoy life to the fullest extent. We travel. We go to a lot of car racing. He loves history. We just do what we want to do. We're trying to make a difference. Gerald's been a state ambassador here for Maine for the MDA for 7 years. We've traveled a lot of Maine. We've been one of the top fundraisers for about 10 years. My son, with this year's, his soccer tournament we just did, he's raised almost $187,000 that he's donated to the MDA, Cancer Societies. He's done the seven largest food drives in our community over the years. So we want to make a difference. We want to change lives. There's a lot of people that don't have the wherewithal or the strength or courage to do it, and that's fine. I totally understand it, but we want to make a difference. We want to help you if we can. You know, it's easy to get a hold of me, Dr. Reynolds, or, but we feel your pain. We have a great understanding of where you're coming from, and we want to help you. So, thank you.
Thank you, Barry. Anybody else?
Wasn't planning to, but that's okay. These things just happen. Hi, everyone. I'm Kelly. I have a son, Luca. He is 5. He will turn 6 in January. And so I was just sitting here thinking, and particularly when Dr. Reynolds did his talk, how many years have gone into some of the treatments that have been discovered for Duchenne. So Luca was born prematurely. He was born 2 months early, and so he was in the NICU for 35 days. And so we came home, and he had delays. And so, you know, they said, okay, he was premature. That's expected. But they really persisted, and they seemed much more than what, you know, what I sort of thought would make sense. And so anyhow, at 2 years old, they finally said, okay, he should be caught up from a prematurity standpoint, and he wasn't. And so they sent us to genetics, and we had the testing. His CK level was like 18,000 or something. It took 2 weeks. The genetic testing came back. March 17th, 2021, we got our diagnosis. My birthday is 3 days later. We were getting ready to leave for our little birthday getaway when we got this diagnosis, and it was a phone call. This is it. And okay, we'll put you in touch with who you need to know. And it pretty much tried to break us. We very quickly, so we went on that little getaway, my husband and I, we already had childcare arranged, and so we went on this getaway, and we spent the entire time, you know, thinking about the diagnosis, doing research. I remember finding PPMD's website and seeing that there were all these therapies that were being studied, and just kind of thinking about, oh my gosh, is this even possible? Like, we had an initial consultation with Dr. Reynolds, and you know, we kind of got the typical picture of Duchenne of what that was going to look like. And I will just say we kind of went into aggressive parent mode. And started trying to figure out, like, what can we explore for therapies, like what can we do? And so Dr. Reynolds and his crew here helped us find our way to Nationwide Children's, which is where we still go. And so Luca started, he was on a steroid trial when he was 2, so he started steroids when he was really young, once a week. And then we did that for about, I don't know, 6 or 7 months. He is exon 45 skip amenable, and so we were able to, that drug got approved like the month before he got diagnosed. And so we started that when he was just about 3 or just under. He was so little, we had to get a portacath put in for those weekly infusions, and so we did like 6 or 8 of those at the hospital, and then finally, thank goodness, we were able to do them at home. He stayed on steroids that whole time, and we were watching the gene therapy trials and kind of watching to see, is this something that we could look into? When they were enrolling 4-year-olds, he was 3, and then he turned 4, and they started enrolling 3-year-olds, and we panicked. And I can still remember when the Elevidus, like the FDA meeting was going on, and kind of watching these videos, and long story short, we made it to getting treated with gene therapy. So we November 7th of last year, 2023, and it has blown my mind to watch him gain strength. And he is a kid who's kind of got treated and identified really early, and so we are so fortunate for that. We know that. We go to bed every night being thankful for that. We've been to conferences where people said, "Oh my God, you're so lucky you found out at 2." And he is now, so we're, however many months, can't do math right now, however many months post gene therapy. We don't do the exon 45 skip right now because he had such an improvement from the gene therapy. So he was able to get his port removed. We don't have that anymore, which has been amazing. But he's doing stairs. He's climbing on everything. It's kind of terrifying because he acts like a toddler. Because he didn't do any of those things when he was 18 months and 2 years old that kids do. He didn't explore anything because he knew his muscles were different. And so now he's this tall and climbing on top of counters. And it just, we would not be where we are without all the research and everything that went before. And so, for us being those kind of aggressive parents has really paid off and has been, we are just so amazed to kind of see where he's at this point. No one knows what the future holds. No one can tell us how long this benefit will be there or anything. But it's amazing some of the foundations and the support to be able to travel and to be able to do those things and get those therapies and all of that. And none of that would be possible without organizations that do this kind of thing. So I've not really shared his story before, but I think, just kind of listening to Dr. Reynolds today. So when we got the gene therapy, we had to live in Ohio for 6 weeks for the monitoring. It was nuts. We live here in Maine. Sorry if I didn't mention that. We had to live in Ohio for 6 weeks. The monitoring was insane. We came back to Maine and continued to follow. Dr. Reynolds did our 3-month follow-up weekly. I mean, it was such a production, but along the way, so much support. And the Duchenne family is, I've heard it said, nobody wants to join this family. This is not a family you want to sign up for. But we have felt so loved and cared for and, hopeful, which I think is, at least the day that we got this diagnosis, hope was not anything that we thought we were ever going to have. So anyhow, thanks for letting me get up here and share that.
Well, thank you. Thank you guys for sharing your stories, especially since it was not planned. So it takes a lot to get up here and do that. So thank you all. We will go ahead and have our meet and greet now. So feel free we have all of our lovely people at their tables. Also feel free to connect with each other as well. Feel free to connect with us as Jett staff. And then we'll come back at 4:30 just to say a wrap up, and you're welcome to stay longer. But if you need to go, we understand. So we will go ahead and break for our meet and greet.